So how are you guys? I am back again with a very fun and exciting new video, which is, what if Naruto wasn't left alone, had a family and certain Kekkei Genkai? Before part 1 started, do like, share and subscribe to the channel and comment down your favorite part. Your one like and one subscribe motivate me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. So without any waste of time, now let's start the fanfic. Uchiha Itachi and Shunshin no Shisui were walking through the village when they heard screaming kid. Probably another mob of drunk civilians try to finish Yondaime job in their opinion. They're too stupid to understand difference between kunai and scroll. I won't allow them to do that, thought Itachi. They quickly ran towards place from where screams were coming and they saw a large crowd torturing small child with mop of blonde, spiky hairs. Shisui, I will deal with this mob, while you catch Naruto and run with him onto the nearest roof. Patch him as much as possible, ordered Itachi, and Shisui only nodded. They were able to communicate without any words spoken due to time they spent together, both on the battlefield and off it. Normal onyx black eyes of Itachi morphed into red and black Sharingan with 3 tomo. He charged towards that mob. Members of it that were in the back rows were the first ones to get into his way. Most of them didn't even have a chance to scream in the alarm as his punches and kicks hit them, knocking them out. Itachi was methodically moving closer to Naruto while knocking out shinobi and civilians that got in his way. They didn't stand a chance against one of Anbu, as only some of the weaker shinobi were joining such mobs. Shisui meanwhile used distraction caused by Itachi to catch Naruto and Shunshined with him to the nearest roof so that he could take a look at him. Naruto's body was battered and bruised, but the strangest thing was the color of his eyes. They were red with 3 tomo, and that was Sharingan, one of the 3 great dojutsu and one that was only appearing in the eyes of Uchiha clan. Which meant that Naruto was somehow connected with Uchiha clan, although how he was connected wasn't known to Shisui, who ran through couple of hand seals and his hand glowed green. He moved it above and along the body of Naruto, trying to see how severe was the damage to internal organs, as they were the biggest problem. Good thing was that he was in so much pain that he was unable to move, as it made checking how bad it looked way easier. He grimaced when his scans showed multiple organs damaged. He had Irionen training, but he couldn't do much with such extent of damage. He could only patch the worst wounds and then get him to the hospital or get one of Anbu combat medics that had more chakra than him. But for that he was going to wait for Itachi. He knocked Naruto out with gentle chop to the back of his neck. At least he wouldn't remember and feel most of that pain, and it would make moving him easier. Going back to Itachi, once every single member of that mob was on the ground and unconscious, he tied them in such way that they couldn't escape and confiscated all of their weapons that they carried for his safety's sake and so that they couldn't escape. Once they were put in nice and even rows, with their hands tied behind their backs, he looked up and saw Shisui standing on one of the roofs and holding unmoving form of Naruto. How bad it is? Itachi asked when he appeared in front of those two. Rarely seen anger visible in his eyes, which normally were matte black and didn't show a thing. He remembered Yondaime Hokage and wanted to murder everybody that attacked his son. I have both good and bad news, replied Shisui. From which one should I start? Bad, only, replied Itachi. It's a miracle he is alive, said Shisui. I rarely saw a body that was so battered and was still alive. Multiple organs damaged, I lost count of broken bones, not to mention dozens of smaller and bigger wounds. And good news? Asked Itachi, hoping that it would be something better. For the first time in ages on his face appeared signs of emotions. He always kept them under tight control, unless when with friends or family. In the open they were always masked. That was impossible to read and unsettling for ones that were dealing with him. He has fully matured Sharingan, said Shisui. I don't know how he got this, but his Sharingan will be quite an interesting one. He might have eternal Mangekyo from the beginning, assuming he will unlock it. Take him to the hospital, use part reserved for Anbu usage, said Itachi. I don't trust normal doctors not to kill him, and if he will be placed in normal part of it, in few hours everybody will be talking about it and wanting to finish what this mob didn't do. And what are you going to do? Asked Shisui, picking up unmoving frame of Naruto. He wasn't showing his emotions, but he was worrying about Naruto, in fact a lot. He hoped that Naruto would be able to come out of this. He knew that Itachi was also worrying about Naruto. After years spent together as they were cousins and hours they spent training, he was able to read subtle changes in Itachi's mask, and he knew when Itachi was worrying. Talk with Hokage-sama and do something about that lot, replied Itachi and indicated crowd tied on the ground. Some of them were waking up and looked around in shock. They were tied and couldn't move. Which meant they were in troubles. Question only was in how big troubles they were going to be. Itachi shunshined from that roof to the Hokage tower and walked into the office of Hokage, who only raised his head from the paperwork and looked who was coming. When he saw Itachi with lips being pulled into a thin line and narrowed eyes, he knew that the news weren't good. They probably were somewhere between very bad and extremely bad. Question only was how bad they were. Hokage-sama, mob attacked Uzumaki Naruto, said Itachi, kneeling on one knee in front of his ruler and commander. I and Shisui stopped them. He took Naruto to the hospital, while I went here. All people that attacked him are tied and awaiting your judgment. How bad it was this time? Asked Hokage, worry appearing in his voice. Last few attacks on Naruto were rather brutal and they could change into outright riots, not to mention that they could kill Naruto. Bad, only replied Itachi. Shisui said that it was a miracle that he was alive. There is also a second thing, Naruto has fully matured Sharingan. Show me where it happened, said Hokage and snapped his fingers, causing 4 Anbu to appear in front of him. You will accompany us there. As you wish, only replied Itachi, walked to the window and jumped out of it, followed by Hokage and his escort. They were jumping from the roof to roof, leaping over the streets where people looked in wonder what was the reason for such a hurry of their leader. They landed in front of that street where crowd attacked Naruto and it was already full of curious people, which immediately got out of it when they saw Hokage walking there. If he was there, it was serious thing and Anbu that were with him confirmed their suspicions. Those are the ones responsible for what happened, asked Hokage, looking at tied people, who were struggling to get away from Hokage as they knew that he was furious, at least that could be said guessing by the cracks in the ground that were appearing all around him. It meant that he had troubles with keeping his chakra under control and that happened when someone was angry or felt another extreme emotion. Yes, replied Itachi. Tora, said Hokage looking at tiger-masked Anbu, who was also leader of detachment protecting the Hokage. Get them to T&I and once they get everything useful out of them, execute them. Anbu bowed to their leader, grabbed tied people and disappeared with them. Some of those prisoners tried to struggle against iron grip of Anbu, but it was pointless. They were too strong. Isn't that a bit too extreme? Asked Itachi. It isn't, calmly replied Hokage, they deserve every bit of what they're going to receive. Now you said that Naruto was in hospital. In which part of it? Anbu ward, said Itachi, I know I shouldn't do that, but I do not trust doctors not to kill him. It was the best decision, said Hokage, we better check on him. After those words, Hokage jumped onto the roof and from there shunshined to the hospital. He walked through the front doors, Itachi half a step behind him. Sharingan spinning madly in his eyes, only sign of his anger. People that were there hurried out of the way of Hokage, as they saw that he was angry. And nobody was going to test him, after all he was called Kami no Shinobi and was an extremely deadly fighter. Itachi walking half a step behind him made them get out of the way even faster. However, Hokage didn't even notice them as he walked past everywhere and towards restricted area, where on guard stood 2 Anbu who saluted to him and moved aside, letting them pass into area that was reserved for treatment of Anbu, an important shinobi that potential could be a target of assassination. When they entered it, they saw a flurry of activity and medics coming and going. Most of them seemed nor to notice Hokage as he was there after more bloodied missions when he wanted to see how battered were Anbu which got home. Some of those medics stopped and walked towards Hokage when they saw who was walking with him. How bad it is? Asked Hokage. Bad, surgeons are working on him, but it will take them at least few more hours to finish patching him up, said one of them and Hokage only nodded. May I know who caused those wounds? Usual mob, said Hokage, with grim determination visible on his face. But this time they won't get a chance to do that again. Marini Ibiki thought that he would have a boring evening as nothing really was happening and was forced to do the bane of his existence, that is paperwork. Nobody liked to do that, yet someone needed to do that and in this case it was him, as he was a commander of T&I. However, his thoughts about the evening shattered, when in front of him appeared Anbu with a lot of tied people. He looked up and saw that they were a little battered, tightly tied and those that carried them, didn't care about how they were treated. which means that they angered someone and he needed to get that out of them. Tora, what did they do? He asked, trying to hide his amusement and relief that he was able to do something else than that blasted paperwork. Almost killed Uzumaki Naruto. Said Tora, Hokage-sama has very clear orders for you. Get everything useful out of them and execute them. Wonderful. Said Ibiki with a grin that would made a shark envious. Tori. Yes. Asked Anbu wearing Tori mask that appeared in front of Ibiki. Get me every single interrogator here. Said Ibiki, and dump this lot into holding cells. While Anbu went to dumping those people into the cells that would be their home for some time, Ibiki was thinking what questions he should ask and how. He was good at getting answers out of people and he knew that they knew that he wasn't going to play nicely. Basically Hokage wanted results and wasn't questioning how he got them, which was fine with Ibiki. He was going to pick them apart piece by piece and get everything useful out of those pieces. It would be a really interesting day of work, at least for him and his interrogators, which would have quite a lot of fun. Mitarashi Anko walked into T&I and saw amount of people that was rarely seen there, unless some important shinobi got caught and they needed to get everything out of his mind. But this time there was none high-value target. Caught, only just a bunch of civilians and ninja. She grinned madly at the idea of so many people to check her skills on. It would be an interesting thing to do. Your orders are simple, said Ibiki, getting everybody's attention. Get every single piece of data out of them, methods doesn't matter. Only results matter. They are going to be executed once you are done with them, so you are free to use whatever you want to. Enko only smiled at those words. It would be a perfect day for her and she wasn't asked to care about state of subject she was going to work on. He could be half dead by the end of her interrogation and she rarely had such opportunity to play with them. Usually she was asked to do that by the rules. She walked down the corridor into the holding cells where were held this that were caught. She passed by them watching who was inside and looking for a person that would be interesting to work with. Her gaze swept over multiple people, men, women and even some academy students. She was looking for over 10 minutes, until her eyes landed on a man that looked to be a rather rich merchant and probably council member. Doors to his cell opened and Kenji raised his head. He saw Mitarashi Anko entering it. When he saw her his blood run cold. She was known as Snake Mistress or Snake Bitch of Konoha and she was one of the best interrogators working for T&I. She was known for her ability to get answers out of almost everybody she was asked to interrogate. Anko smiled predatory when she saw that her target was shitting himself when he saw her. It made her work so much easier. He probably didn't know that today he wouldn't be leaving this building alive and he would be buried in unnamed grave as all traitors were buried. She entered his cell and yanked him up, forcing him to walk in front of her. He struggled against her grip, but she held strong and wasn't letting him go. They walked through the halls of the building and they entered large room with simple metal table in the middle of it and 2 chairs set around it. Anko shoved her target into one, so far she would be playing nicely. Once he was tied to one, she sat in one opposing him and allowed Snake that was hiding in her sleeve to appear on the table. It was highly venomous breed of king cobra and rather large one as well. It slithered out of her sleeve and coiled on the table. Taking most of the space there, it was over 5 meters long and rather dangerous. Kenji paled when he saw the snake coil comfortably on the table in front of him and look at him. Anko only smiled when she saw the reaction of Kenji. Her main summon was causing such reactions on ones she was interrogating. This little snake will tell me when you are going to lie, so I suggest that you won't do that. Unless you want to get it uncomfortable and dangerous for you, said Anko with rather nasty smile on her lips. She looked rather terrifying with that snake coiled in front of her on the table and looking at that councilman. I won't answer any of your questions, said defiantly Kenji, and she only laughed, while her cobra only hissed at him, showing her fangs covered in venom. Anko tilted her head to the right, looking at Kenji with curiosity. He was an interesting case. Usually they were more willing to talk. She sighed and decided to do it quickly and rather painfully for him. She looked at her cobra who nodded and coiled her body, raising her head and preparing to strike. It leapt towards Kenji, her mouth open and fangs extended. She buried them in his shoulder and retreated. Kenji should be thankful that this bit was so short, as it entered only enough of poison to increase all sensations by dozens, if not hundreds of times, and to cause immense pain to his whole body. It would take few minutes to take full effect, but it already started spreading. The fact that he was uneasy and his heart was beating quickly only helped with that, not to mention place where he was bitten. Shoulder, from which way to the heart and main part of the bloodstream was extremely short. After that Anko extended her hand and grabbed Kenji with his chair, she freed him from it, but she immediately pinned him against the wall with couple of well-placed kunai that passed through his clothes. She walked towards him and looked at him curiously. "Who are you?" she asked, starting with the easiest question. "I won't speak with you," shouted Kenji, knowing well that he needed to bid his time. Civilian council would raise hell about what just happened, so he should be able to get out of the room in few hours. However, he didn't know that his fate was already sealed and rest of the civilian council wouldn't do much, only would annoy Hokage-sama. When Anko heard that answer, she smiled like a piranha, showing her beautiful teeth in the process, but her smile wasn't pleasant. It promised a lot of pain and suffering for someone who got onto her bad side. After that she slapped him across the face, accidentally breaking his nose and causing small fountain of blood to erupt from it. "I will ask once again," she sweetly said, "who are you?" "Kenji." He only replied, and Anko glanced at her snake, which stood where she was nodding approvingly. "You speak truth, good boy," she said, and thought how to phrase the next question. "Can you tell me what were you doing today around noon?" "I was doing some shopping," said Kenji, and another slap was heard all over the room, followed by scream of pain. Kenji spit some blood out of his mouth and couple of teeth as well. Anko wasn't known for being gentle and she wasn't going to be kind during interrogation. "I wonder to which parts of you we will get before you will start speaking truth," said Anko and looked at him. Again, "What were you doing today around noon?" "I was walking through the village," said Kenji, causing Anko to laugh at those words. "I will tell you this only once," said Anko. "I will get those answers out of you one way or another, so you will only slow me down and I'm in no mood to be playing games with you. So I suggest you just cooperate." "So once again, where were you at noon?" "I was with the mob that was hunting that demon child," said Kenji, and Anko smiled at him. "Good boy," she said, smiling sweetly, and continued her questioning of him. They weren't hard to break if one knew how to do that, and fear was a powerful motivation. While Anko was having her fun with few poor souls, Hokage was waiting in the hospital for first reports after all those surgeries, most of which only helped natural healing abilities of Naruto to work. Such as removing objects embedded in flesh and organs or pulling wounds together so they would heal faster, but excluding that, cleaning his wounds and putting pieces of bones in their proper places, they didn't need to do a lot of work on him. "Hokage-sama," said Eiji, getting aged leader attention. "He will heal all of those injuries as if nothing happened. He is in deep coma and he will be in it for next day or two so that his body can heal those injuries, but other than that he is okay. Only chakra coils in his eyes are abnormally large, like he had some sort of dojutsu. That's because he has Sharingan," said Itachi. "He probably didn't realize he had it and he had it constantly active. Also, people didn't want to see it, so nobody told him that he had it." "But how can he possibly have it?" asked Eiji. "None of his parents had it. One of them had it," replied Itachi, "but that's not my story to tell." After that Itachi looked at Hokage. "May I speak with my father about it?" "Of course, Itachi-kun," said Hokage. Itachi nodded and walked out of the wing and shunshine towards Uchiha Mansion. When he appeared in front of it, mask he was wearing dropped from his face, allowing all of his worries and fears to appear on it. He walked towards study of his father and entered it, not bothering to knock, and he accidentally interrupted meeting between his father and clan elders. Every occupant of the room looked up from the papers over which they were focused and looked to see who interrupted them. They saw that one that interrupted them was Uchiha Itachi, eldest son of Uchiha Fugaku and his heir. "To-san," said Itachi politely, immediately putting back mask on his face, "I need to speak with you privately about something that happened in the village today. As it will have immense effects on our clan. I trust elders of our clan," said his father, "so whatever you wanted to tell me in private, you may tell me with them in attendance." "As you wish," said Itachi and sat on the floor in front of the clan council. Uzumaki Naruto has Sharingan, fully evolved one as well. Fugaku didn't move for a moment and his face was lacking any expression as he was only waiting for that day to happen. He would be able to get around civilian council and their stupid ideas to block adoption of him by any of ninja clans. Apparently not only he realized consequences of those revelations, and few councilmen were wide-eyed and a little pale. I was wondering when it was going to happen. Said Fugaku, I think we can disperse with usual song and dance, and I will be blunt with you. As all of you know, my father, Uchiha Barui, had 2 wives. First one was Senju Naomi, and she was mother of Namikaze Minato, who is my half-brother, and as such there was a secret part of Minato will. One known only to me, him, his wife, and I believe Jiraiya, who was a second witness of signing it. He asked me and it to adopt Naruto into Uchiha clan in the event that he unlocks his Sharingan. Which means that council will throw a fit. Said Kagami, as they try to wrestle as much control and power from Shinobi and Hokage hands, and adoption of Naruto will cause that we will rise in power. Also for the sake of doing anything against Naruto. They can complain as much as they can or want to, but they won't stop me. Said Fugaku, if they will be reminded why some clans are feared for their skills on the battlefield. Of course, nodded Eiji, we agree with you, but it is our duty as a council to show you disadvantages of your decisions and what effects they can have on our clan and village in which we are living. Thank you, said Fugaku, and they nodded. I need to speak with the Hokage-sama. You won't mind if we finish the meeting at the later date? No, of course not, said almost everybody, and they hurried out of the room. Fugaku meanwhile walked out of the room and towards living room, where he found Makoto, who noticed that something happened. Honey, what happened? She softly asked. She easily saw through that mask Fugaku was wearing and wondered what was the reason for his behavior. Naruto has finally awakened his Sharingan, quietly replied Fugaku. I was going to visit him in the hospital and speak with Hokage-sama about it. Of course, she said and moved to his side. I will go with you. They quickly left the room in their manner, walking through the streets of the village towards the hospital, walking quickly but not showing in their posture that they were in hurry. They were wearing classic mask of Uchiha clan, that is sneers showing their arrogance and that they looked down on almost everybody. When they entered the hospital, people looked at them as they saw Itachi leaving it without any words and were wondering where he went. They headed without any words towards restricted part of the hospital, and 2 guards standing on the outside of it moved away from it, letting them pass. Their entrance caught the attention of almost everybody, especially the fact that they walked directly towards Hokage, who was standing by the window, looking outside of it and seemed to be deep in thoughts. Hokage-sama, politely said Fugaku, getting his attention. Fugaku-san, Makoto-chan, replied Hiruzen, I guess that Itachi-kun told you about what we had found. Yes, he did, replied Fugaku, we both know what that means. Secret part of Minato will is now active, and as such he is going to be adopted into Uchiha clan. Yes, said Hokage, rubbing his temples, worries and troubles visible on his face. It was going to be a political nightmare, as civilian council was going to scream about this decision. May we see him? Asked Makoto. Of course, replied Eiji, who was the one that patched him up. He will be covered in bandages, but he will recover fully. They walked into a small room and saw Naruto laying there on the bed that was in the middle of it. He was covered in multiple bandages and looked pale, also signs of malnutrition were visible. Makoto hissed when she saw them. She was able to understand a lot of things, but not a malnutrition. He looks bad, she quietly said, and did couple of diagnostic jutsu on her own. It seems that Fox is more of the blessing than a curse. He is fixing as much damage as it is possible, and that explains how he survived those things. We will make sure that he will grow up in safe and happy atmosphere, assured her Fugaku, knowing well that they were playing a risky game with that adoption. A lot was riding on it. Tensions inside of the village were going to rise, and they were going to need to release them in somewhat controllable manner, without causing too much collateral damage to everything. Yes, we will, agreed Makoto and looked at Eiji. Let us know the moment he wakes up. As you wish, said Medic, and she nodded. Now we need to plan how to deal with this situation, she said, looking at Fugaku. Yes, agreed with them Hokage. Adoption forms will be filled out and signed by today evening. Thank you Hokage-sama, said Fugaku, nodding his head lightly. Support from Hokage made pushing this decision way easier, especially if clans were going to stand united as they usually did. Especially when civilian council was trying to pass another stupid decision. After that they simply stood there, watching unmoving form of Naruto in complete silence, excluding sounds emitted by heart monitor and his breathing. Council room was abuzz with activity and talks, Everybody already heard about what happened today and civilian council was displeased with what happened, also several of them were missing. While Shinobi wondered why it took so long for Hokage to finally decide to punish them as they should be punished. Most of them remembered how Namikaze Minato was ruling and they wished those times could came back. He wasn't so soft and justice was swift and brutal. With this one it wasn't so swift or brutal as it should be and civilians had way too much power. All talks and chatter stopped when doors to the chamber flew open and Hokage walked in, followed by Uchiha Fugaku, Makoto and Itachi. Some looked at them in wonder, while some only in fear. They knew that whatever had happened had some sort of influence on Uchiha clan. And guessing by the way in which they entered it had a rather good influence on it, but with Uchiha nobody was sure, as they were masters of hiding their emotions under the mask. They walked to their seats and only sign of Uchiha being angry were slowly spinning Sharingan, at least those were only signs visible for the civilian council. Shinobi sighed immediately read more subtle signs, tensed bodies, small ticks of corners of their mouths, slightly narrowed eyes and so on. But Shinobi were masters of reading other people, so for them those subtle signs weren't so subtle, causing some of them to gulp and hope that they weren't on the receiving end of incoming fury. 3 village elders and Hokage advisors sat on the opposite side of the table and looked at Hokage curiously. They knew something happened, but didn't know what. They only managed to learn that it was something bad and that it was extremely delicate matter. Their suspicions were raised even higher when they saw who was accompanying Hokage to the chamber. It only meant they were in private meeting and it was rather important. "Where are Kenji, Akihiro and Co?" asked one of civilians' counselors. "Where they should be," replied Hokage, "inside of T&I and if I'm right they're meeting interrogators, due to what happened earlier today. Assault on the newest member of Uchiha clan. Fugaku-san if you could do the honors," said Hokage and gave Fugaku sealed scroll on which was visible the seal of Yondaime Hokage and one of Uchiha clan near it. "With pleasure," only replied Fugaku. He took scroll handed to him. He broke the seal and handed it back to Hokage. "Ah yes," said Hokage, his eyes running over the things written inside of the scroll. "Last will and testament of Namikaze Minato. To Hitaki Kakashi, 10 million ryo and my collection of books, along with scrolls on Sharingan from Namikaze library. Use them well and do not fall into self-pity. To Uchiha Fugaku, who is my half-brother, my sabers and scrolls on the Rasengan and Hiraishin for safekeeping until my son is ready to get them. To Jiraiya, all my notes and research about space and time ninjutsu and other research. Maybe you will be able to finish those things. Everything else I leave to my son Namikaze Naruto. In case that he unlocks Sharingan before he is 12, I ask Fugaku to adopt him into Uchiha clan, treat him as his own son and to fully train him in Uchiha way of war. Signed, Namikaze Minato. Uchiha Fugaku as a witness. Jiraiya as a witness. Namikaze ne Uzumaki Kushina as a witness." When Hokage read content of this scroll aloud, level of noise rised in the room to level that was almost impossible to imagine. Everybody was shouting at everybody and it looked like it wasn't going to stop anytime soon. He let them shout for few more minutes, before he slammed his hand onto the surface of the table, silencing them immediately, but not for a long time. It seemed they were ready to draw the ire of person they shouldn't draw. "It's fake," yelled Koga, "demon child can't be his son. Naruto has a name," retorted Fugaku, glaring across the table, "and unless you're brain dead you will be able to tell that Naruto is his son." "Execute him," yelled someone else and got thrown in the wall by annoyed Shikaku, who used his shadow to do so. "Can all of you just shut up your mouths for a moment?" asked Shikaku and when they nodded, some of them reluctantly, he looked once again over their faces. "This scroll is legit and we all know that. So can we get over it?" "Thank you Shikaku-san," said Hokage, "is said, this scroll is legit and we won't contest that fact. Now for all your knowledge, Naruto has active Sharingan and as such last part of the will is active. It will be carried out and you will do exactly nothing to stop it. Unless you want to join your colleagues inside of T&I, which they won't leave alive." "You won't dare," screamed shocked Kaharu. "Yes, I will dare," replied Hokage and looked over their faces. "Everything stays in this chamber and it will be carried out, council." Dismissed. Civilians got out of the chamber as quickly as they could. They were shocked by the events of today and it looked like it was getting worse for them. And could only get worse. While Shinobi side of the council walked out slowly talking about those events and enjoying their time, it looked like future of Konoha looked bright and it seemed that problem of son of Namikaze Minato was finally solved. On the next day after that fateful council meeting, moods in Konoha were rather dark and some people were arrested thanks to what those captured previously told ones that were interrogating them. But excluding that life was good and somewhat peaceful, shinobi were doing missions, training and relaxing while civilians were focused on their lives. Naruto slowly opened his eyes and looked around. He saw that he was in room all painted white, which meant that another mob attacked him and he still didn't know for what he was attacked. He remembered being saved by someone, but he didn't know by who. He also noticed his body covered in bandages and the fact that nothing was aching him and working as it should be. When his sight fully focused, he noticed Hokage standing in the corner and quietly talking with man and woman, who had Uchiha crest on their clothes. He groaned and it was noticed by them that he was awake. Hokage looked at Naruto and later at Fugaku, silent messages being exchanged between them. They couldn't decide who should explain all of this to Naruto. It was a touchy subject and it needed to be done gently and slowly. Aged leader slowly nodded towards Fugaku and moved towards Naruto, thinking how to put in words what he wanted to tell Naruto. Naruto-kun, I see that you are awake, said Hokage sitting on the chair that was standing to the left of the bed. How are you feeling? Good, said Naruto. What happened to me? You were attacked by a mob. Carefully said Hokage, but that's not important. Do you know how to channel your chakra? Yes, replied Naruto, we were taught that last year at the academy. Good, said Hokage, channel it into your eyes. Naruto focused on his chakra, trying it to channel into his eyes. He pushed it into them and he felt a sudden change when he did that. He was able to see further and with greater detail, not to mention that he was able to see chakra cores and what would happen in near future. He was unaware that Fugaku and Makoto were looking at him, rather curiously, especially at his Sharingan as it seemed to be spinning faster and faster. Like it was trying to evolve even further. Which technically should be impossible as Mangekyo was known to manifest under different circumstances. Yet 3 tomos that were circling around the dot in the middle of the eye were spinning faster and faster. After few moments of it they were almost blurs and impossible to recognize. It was a sign that Sharingan was evolving even further. After few minutes of such a fast spinning they stopped revealing new patterns inside of Naruto eyes. It was fabled Mangekyo Sharingan. One that Naruto had was quite an interesting one. It was a 3-pointed pinwheel and between prongs were tomo in places they would usually occupy in normal Sharingan. When it fully evolved it glowed menacingly and Naruto looked at everybody in the room. Even famous Uchiha control over emotions couldn't prevent Fugaku from gawking like a fish. They managed to hide their shock when they saw Naruto looking at them. Looks like you have a Sharingan, said Hokage, looking at the Naruto, and it looks like it is quite a special one. Gigi, what do you mean by that? Asked Naruto, and at those words Hokage looked at Fugaku, who only nodded. Hokage-sama means that it is Mangekyo Sharingan. Explained Fugaku, I believe there were total 5 Uchiha that managed to unlock it before you. 2 of which are currently living, you are 6th one that unlocked it. It has some special abilities, but those can wait for later time. Hokage-sama, if you could do the honors. He said those words and was one of few people that managed to silence Naruto without any troubles. Ah yes, said Hokage, mindlessly straightening his robe, which was a sign that he was a little uncomfortable and wasn't sure how to handle this thing. Let's jump back in time 8 years or so. As you know, or at least should know, it was the time of Yondaime Hokage, Kiroi Senko Namikaze Minato. His wife was Uzumaki Kushina, princess of Uzushiogakure, sister village of Konoha. When Naruto heard those words, something clicked in his mind and his jaw dropped. Uzumaki, softly said Naruto. I see that you made the connection between those 2 things, said Hokage and took out small picture of Minato from his robe and handed it to Naruto, whose eyes widened when he saw the obvious resemblance between himself and Namikaze Minato. Those same spiky golden hairs, same stark blue eyes, and only thing that was different were 3 birthmarks on Naruto's face. Nobody spoke for a moment, letting Naruto get over the fact that he wasn't some nameless and clanless orphan. Is it true? Quietly asked Naruto, not sure if he was seeing it right. For him it looked impossible to believe. It is, said Hokage, and before he could speak anything more, he was interrupted by outburst from Naruto, famous Uzumaki temper manifesting itself in interesting way. Why did you never tell me? Why? Yelled Naruto, and Hokage let him vent off his anger and emotion, as he know well that in similar situation he would also have troubles keeping his emotions under control. Naruto, calm down, sternly said Hokage, and Naruto nodded, calming himself down. Because of who he was, he made too many powerful enemies, and many of them would simply kill you for the sake of making sure he didn't left any heirs. So I decided that you would be given maiden name of your mother. I wanted to reveal it to you once you were made Chunin, but in this case my hand was forced. It was written in his last will and testament that if you were to unlock Sharingan, you were supposed to be adopted into Uchiha clan. To be exact by his brother, but that's not my part of the story to tell. If not yours, then whose? Asked Naruto in somewhat shaky voice. He had troubles believing in what he was hearing. It looked almost impossible to believe, at least for him. Mine, said Fugaku, getting attention of everybody in the room. As he recently rarely spoke about his late brother due to sorrow and grief he felt. Minato was my brother. My father had 2 wives, first one was Senju Naomi, and with her he had Minato. Naomi was a sister of Tsunade and only Senju that showed signs of having Mokuton. Soon after Minato was born, his death and Naomi were faked so that she could raise him without fear of assassins going after them. When he said that, he glanced at Makoto, who nodded. We would love to adopt you into Uchiha clan and as our 5th son. Do you accept? Naruto was speechless and wide-eyed for a moment. He couldn't believe that his dreams were going to be fulfilled. He was going to have a family. He burst crying for a moment, until he managed to compose himself. It was obvious that he was happy. He wanted to have a family, and Makoto could see that rather easily. Yes, said Naruto, and on Fugaku's face appeared smile. He completely dropped mask that he usually wore. He was in private, so he let his emotions show. He was happy and only best intentions were visibly across his face, but inside he was planning how to deal with fallout of that decision. Good thing was that it was beginning of a week and they could organize everything before shit was going to hit the fan. Civilians were going to throw a fit about it, and they would use every single thing that was accessible to them. Some of them were rather drastic. So suggesting that someone would shadow him at all times wouldn't be a bad idea, or maybe leave from the academy, and suggestion that Itachi would teach him some basics of interceptor fist and other basic things first. You are free to be released from the hospital, said Makoto softly, so unless you have something precious in your previous flat that you want to take, we will go directly into the district. No, I don't think I have anything precious in my flat, said Naruto slowly, before repeating that more confidentially. No, I don't have anything precious there. Okay, said Makoto, we will go to the district now. And do shopping once we are there. Clothes, ninja supplies and other necessities. Naruto only followed and let Makoto to shunshun him with her to the entrance of Uchiha Mansion. When they appeared there, Naruto went wide-eyed when he saw the building in front of him. It looked huge, and it was huge. Uchiha Mansion was 2-story tall building with most of the ground floor occupied by rooms used during formal meetings and during training. That is, large dining room big enough to house a dinner for 50 people. There was also a private dojo for usage of people inhabiting it, along with jutsu library. On the first floor were rooms for members of clan head family to live in, along with living room and kitchen. Last but not least was second floor, which was occupied mostly by storage rooms and second library. Behind the building there was a small private training ground for the usage of people living in it, when they wanted to practice jutsu and didn't fancy being seen doing that. It's huge, said Naruto, causing Makoto to chuckle. You will get used to it, she said softly. Almost everybody has similar reaction when he sees it for the first time. Come in. They walked inside slowly, and Naruto looked around in awe. Everything around screamed wealth and power. Precious painting on the walls, statues placed in alcoves that were lining the walls. It looked beautiful. They climbed the stairs up and entered area where everybody was living. Wealth of Uchiha was still obvious, but it wasn't flaunted as it was done downstairs. Here it was shown in subtler way, in quality of this standing there, but yet that was expected as they were one of the noble clans. They walked across the short corridor, until they arrived at the end of it and stood in front of sliding door. Makoto opened it and Naruto was able to see a large room, Painted in neutral colors, it was a rather large room with few weapon stands and shelves for scrolls or books standing in the corner and by the left wall, not to mention that there were few drawers and wardrobes. There were also sizable windows that provided plenty of light, and by them stood a large desk for his usage. Over those windows could be drawn crimson-red curtains. Floor of it was covered in rugs and tatami mats over dark brown wooden floor. Naruto got wide-eyed when he saw the whole room. And Makoto chuckled when she saw his reaction. She noticed that he was shocked by it, as it was expected from him. She knew where he was living and this room was probably larger than his whole flat. "That will be your room," she said, and Naruto nodded. "Makoto-chan," said Fugaku in getting her attention. "Why don't you go shopping with Naruto and settle him in, while I will find Itachi, as I want to talk with him about Mangekyo Sharingan." "Of course," said Makoto and looked at Naruto, who nodded. After Fugaku left Makoto and Naruto, he walked down the stairs and towards dojo where Itachi should be training Interceptor Fist with Shisui, as he was supposed to do at least. He walked towards it and he heard clashes of bones coming from inside, which meant they were doing that as they were supposed to be doing. He opened the doors and saw them clashing in the middle of the room, and they stopped the moment they noticed him. "To-san," said Itachi when he saw him. "What do you need? You both know that Naruto has Sharingan?" Fugaku asked, just to be sure that they knew it, and they only nodded. "When we were to pick him up it evolved even further." "Fugaku-san," said Shisui, getting his attention, "you don't mean Mangekyo?" "Mine and Itachi one manifested when we saw Izumi being killed in front of us." "Yes, I mean Mangekyo," said Fugaku and looked at Itachi, who was deep in his thought and his face was impossible to read. "Itachi, I would like you to work with Naruto on his Sharingan, Interceptor Fist, and general basics, as civilians will be doing everything in their power to annoy us or injure him." "I can do that," said Itachi and looked at his father. "What about Sasuke? He doesn't like Naruto and he might throw a temper tantrum. Also he will be envious that Naruto got Mangekyo, assuming he will learn about it. He should see a reason," said Fugaku, "especially once I will explain to him why Naruto is adopted and who he is." "I guess you are right," said Itachi and looked at Shisui. "We will finish it later. I will be busy with teaching Naruto." "Have fun teaching that runt," said cheerfully Shisui, before leaving Fugaku and Itachi in the dojo. "I will have fun," said Itachi and added more quietly, "or at least I hope to have it. If he is anything like his father, you will have a lot of fun, and he is half Uzumaki, which means amounts of chakra that can make Jonin envious," said Fugaku, who managed to overheard what Itachi said. "But remember that in the academy they probably taught him wrong." "Something else that I should know?" asked Itachi. "I would like you to show him basics of Kenjutsu, as I'm going to give him weapons of his parents," said Fugaku, and Itachi nodded. "Let's see," said Itachi, making a list of things he needed to show to Naruto. "Basics from the academy, check them to see if someone didn't teach him wrong. Interceptor Fist, Sharingan Jutsu, which by default includes Kaden Jutsu and Kenjutsu. I didn't miss anything." "Yes," said Fugaku, getting attention of Itachi. "Try to do something about that conflict between him and Sasuke. And be a good older brother to him." "I thought that I mentioned those two things," said Itachi, looking out of the dojo and into the garden, that was behind the mansion and currently was almost empty. It would a long day and a long week in front of him. It will be an interesting thing to do and probably fun one as well. "Not only for you," said Fugaku, and Itachi nodded in agreement. "Mainly for him, he never had a family before, he was an orphan since his birth." "Yes," agreed Itachi, "there was also a problem with Naruto being a Jinchuriki, but with that they would wait and introduce him to Kyuubi when he would be mentally ready. But he would have a huge advantage over previous Jinchuriki of it, he would be an Uchiha, which meant Sharingan, and that Kyuubi was more willing to listen to reasons when he was going to see Sharingan." Meanwhile, Makoto managed to drag Naruto for shopping and got back with him while they were talking about his training. She got for him everything that could be useful or needed by him, and now he looked half decent. He was wearing beige shorts, that went slightly over the knees, blue t-shirt with Uchiha fan on the back of it, and under it mesh armor. One lower part of his legs were covered in bandages. On his right hand was a simple bracelet, with Uzumaki swirls and Namikaze wolf. Think about sign used by witchers and you will know what I mean by that. Also on his hip was double kunai holster, and on his belt were 2 utility pouches with ninja tools and miscellaneous things that all ninja carried and needed to have. He looks well, said Itachi, when he finally saw Naruto. At least better than he was looking. Said Makoto, I will leave him with you as I know that Two-san spoke with you about checking what he knows and correcting any mistakes. Indeed he spoke, said Itachi, and Makoto nodded. Naruto stood there unsure what to do. Itachi noticed that and looked at him, smiling a little and sitting on the floor of dojo, which was covered in tatami mats that normally softened the impact during training. Especially during interceptor fist training, as it used to be one that usually ended with people on the ground. Come here, I won't bite you. Sure, Ni-san, said Naruto, testing the waters, and walked to the place where Itachi was sitting. He sat there on the tatami mat in front of Itachi and was able to take a better look at the inside of dojo. He saw that near the walls were placed both normal swords and wooden ones, called bakken, and they were used during initial stages of kenjutsu training when it was too dangerous to use normal sword. Itachi smiled when Naruto used Ni-san in relation to him. It sounded good and right to be used, but he was shocked that Naruto was so fast to adapt. Well, said Itachi with thin smile, Two-san asked me to check what you know and correct any mistakes that Academy could make, and they are known for making them. What do you know about chakra? It's made out of physical and mental energy. Replied Naruto. At least they didn't make mistakes in complete basics. Said Itachi, looked at Naruto and slowly let his mask slip from his face. Can you name and show me all 12 basic seals? Naruto nodded and made those seals. As he was making them he was saying their names. Tori, bird, I, boar, inu, dog, tatsu, dragon, ushi, ox, tora, tiger, mi, snake, nei, rat, uma, horse, suru, monkey, yu, hare, hitsuji, ram. There are some small flaws in them, but that's usual thing for all shinobi to have, and they will mostly correct on their own. Said Itachi with his Sharingan active to see the flow of chakra as Naruto was making those seals. While Sharingan didn't show pathways and tenketsu, it allowed to see general flow of chakra inside of body and allowed to see how it was being formed when using hand seals. He also allowed steady and small trickle of amber chakra into chakra system of Naruto. It was purified chakra of Kyuubi, and it was constantly increasing amount of chakra that was available to Naruto. Ototo, can you make Ram seal and keep it for as long as you can? Itachi asked Naruto. Why? Asked Naruto. I want to see how much chakra you have. Explained Itachi. I want to see if I'm only seeing things or you have as much chakra as should have someone with high Jonin level. Because that would explain why you would have troubles with Bunshin and leaf spinning exercise. Naruto only nodded and placed his hands in Ram's seal. He started channeling chakra through it, and Itachi looked at the watch that was on his hand and later at Naruto, who seemed to be enveloped in blue hue of chakra, his hairs slightly raising. While Naruto was doing that, Itachi looked at him with his Sharingan active, estimating how much chakra he had, and his initial estimates were correct. Which was expected from his, as he was half-blood Uzumaki and had also blood of Senju and Uchiha, who also had rather big amount of chakra at their disposal, and it was incredibly dense. This could cause quite a few interesting problems, and he would probably show him quickly. Tree and water walking, as his control without them was atrocious, and leaf spinning was useless for him. It was as useful as attempting to block flow of the water in giant river with only pebbles. Apparently such large and constant output of chakra was noticed by Makoto, who walked down to dojo and entered it, but stopped when she saw that Itachi pressed his finger against his lips and pointed at Naruto, who seemed to be channeling that chakra. When she saw what was happening, she only nodded and quietly left. It was a usual thing to do when checking how much chakra had someone, and in this case it looked like a lot. Unless someone had a lot of chakra, it never manifested outside of his body in such amounts. There was a difference between keeping seal constantly active and using it for a short amount of time during preparations to launch jutsu. Keeping it constantly active was more exhausting the longer it was kept, and not many were able to go for more than 15 minutes. When just flashing through hand seals, it was only a short burst or pulse of chakra, and it was almost impossible to notice. Only final seal was requiring more chakra, and it decided about strength of the jutsu. Itachi was glancing at the watch and onto Naruto, wondering when he was going to stop channeling the chakra. It seemed that Naruto was going for over 15 minutes and was still going, which was enough for him. It meant that he had high Jonin chakra levels, and that would be an interesting issue, extremely interesting one. That's enough, calmly said Itachi, and Naruto opened his eyes and stopped channeling the chakra. Looks like you have high Jonin reserves and they will only increase. I have only average Jonin level ones and Sasuke should have around high Genin level if I remember correctly. Sweet, yelled Naruto, I have more chakra than Sasuke. But he didn't have much time to cheer, as he was brought down onto the ground by Itachi. But your control over it is atrocious, said Itachi, and noticed that Naruto slumped. I will show you how to get control over it, but that will be later. Now I want to talk with you about Uchiha clan taijutsu style. You probably saw it when Sasuke used it or other Uchiha kids at the academy. Naruto only winced when he remembered those fights against Sasuke, they didn't end well. I remember seeing them using it. They were almost impossible to pin down. Yep, that's it, said Itachi, it's based on avoiding being hit and responding with quick strikes, you attack and jump away. It can work without Sharingan, but it won't be at its fullest, that is because of one of many abilities of Sharingan. One that allows us to predict what is going to happen. Ni-san, what do you mean by that? Asked Naruto, not sure what Itachi meant. Activate yours and I will show you what I mean, replied Itachi, and Naruto nodded. His normal cerulean blue eyes changed into red and black of Sharingan. When Itachi saw it, he threw at Naruto small ball that he had handy for showing him this thing. Naruto moved to catch it, and he did that without any problems, and it wasn't a conscious decision of his body, but one fueled by Sharingan and his instincts. That is what I mean by ability to predict, you saw where it was going to be, so you were able to intercept it. Cool, said Naruto, and Itachi only smiled. Not many knew, but he was extremely protective of his family and was one of those that had a questionable pleasure of guarding Naruto, before he became an Uchiha and he became somewhat protective of him. Yes, it is handy, agreed Itachi, I will show you basic katas of it and you will train them. Normally I wouldn't say that you do that, but watch me with your Sharingan and try to copy those moves, it will help you a lot. After that, Itachi for next 30 minutes was slowly going through katas of Interceptor Fist and allowing Naruto to copy them with his Sharingan. While he was doing that, he was explaining to him how to use them and when to use which one. He was surprised when Naruto was able to learn them quickly and understand them. When he looked through Naruto Academy grades, they were the lowest of low, just enough to pass. It meant that someone was sabotaging him or Naruto was learning things better when going at his own pace, or mix of both of those things. If Itachi was going to bet, he would say it was the mix of those two things. Now academy instructors would have troubles with sabotaging him, especially with him or Two-san looking over their shoulder and making sure they were playing by the rules. Also that they weren't giving him wrong instructions and or grading his work unfairly, which was almost impossible with Sasuke being there. Assuming they would dare to do so, but they were unpredictable and weren't paragons of logic and intelligence. Those are all katas of art taijutsu style and I would like you to go through all of them, said Itachi, when he was done showing all of them to Naruto. I want to make sure you learned them correctly and do not make any mistakes in them. Naruto only nodded at those words, he was learning more and far quicker than he was learning at the academy. He also felt that Itachi was genuinely caring about his well-being and he appreciated that. He didn't know how, but he was able to somehow feel emotions of other in relation to him, and when he was here, he only felt good or at least neutral emotions. Which was a huge change compared to what he felt when he was in the village, where he was surrounded by the sea of hatred and anger. It's good, said Itachi, when he saw how Naruto was going from kata to kata of Interceptor Fist. You only need to practice it, but that's thing that everybody needs to do. I will spar few times with you so that you can get used to this style. It's different from Tiger Fist that you were taught at the academy, so you will need to forget all things you have learned about taijutsu. Let's do that, said Naruto, and Itachi nodded, smiling. They raised from the floor and stood some distance away from each other. Both of them in the opening kata of Interceptor Fist and were looking at each other, looking for holes in defense of their enemy, while their Sharingan were slowly spinning. Naruto charged at Itachi, who simply sidestepped and dodged entirely the attack, much to Naruto's annoyance at such thing. He looked at Itachi and this time he tried to aim better and almost managed to hit him, but yelped in surprise when he passed just above the Itachi, who dodged under it and looked at Naruto with amusement. Think more, attack less, said Itachi, and blocked strike aimed at his head. He caught outstretched leg, and when he did that, Naruto eyes widened in surprise. He didn't expect something like that to happen to him. Being rash isn't the best thing. He added and lightly punched Naruto in his gut, sending him onto the ground where he landed in heap of tangled limbs and groaned getting up. "You're nasty," groaned Naruto, getting back on his feet and looking at Itachi with some anger and resentment visible in his eyes. "Me?" asked Itachi and Naruto only nodded. "I don't remember being such, I just showed you your mistake." "Annoying Ni-san," said Naruto, charging at Itachi, this time being more careful with what he was doing. His Sharingan spinning and trying to anticipate what Itachi was going to do. Being more careful was paying off and he didn't get caught in simple and stupid traps that were waiting for him, at least not that easily and quickly. They spent more than 30 minutes doing that, and when they were done with it, Naruto looked a little battered and was covered in sweat. But he was starting to learn how to use this style and he was natural with it, which honestly for Itachi wasn't a huge surprise, especially considering how his body was built and who was his father. Famous Konoha no Kiroi Senko was mainly a speed fighter, not a strength fighter, and he would better utilize Interceptor Fist than a Tiger Fist, which was a basic style taught to every shinobi at the academy, assuming they weren't learning Taijutsu style of their clan. "That wasn't too bad," said Itachi, when they were done with training. He still couldn't believe how much energy had Naruto. He knew he would have a lot, but that was just wow. He had a lot of energy and burning it would be a huge problem. "You seem to grasp the basics of it and Sharingan is only helping with it. Next thing I want to talk with you is a little touchy and you probably won't be too happy with it." "What do you mean by that?" asked Naruto, noticing that Itachi shifted uncomfortably and his emotions changed to somewhat troubled ones. Like he didn't know how or didn't want to touch upon the subject. "Sasuke, or rather your rivalry with him," explained Itachi, and Naruto immediately tensed at those words. "I don't want you to outright like him, but I won't tolerate your competition with him, at least not one filled with hatred and anger. Healthy competition is good, but not the ones you two have." When Naruto heard those words he hissed. He didn't like Sasuke too much and that feeling was mutual. That only confirmed Itachi's suspicions, as he was rather good at reading people and their minds, and now Naruto was showing exactly what he thought and felt about Sasuke. "I will try," said Naruto, "but I do not promise anything. I don't like him too much and I don't think he will agree." "Give him a shot," said Itachi, "he should see some reasons." "I hope so," said Naruto, as he didn't want to have this conflict with Sasuke. "Good," said Itachi and looked at Naruto. "What do you truly know about Sharingan? Powers and stages of it?" "Not much really," replied Naruto, and Itachi nodded. "Then it will take some time to explain," said Itachi, getting Naruto attention. "It normally has 3 stages of evolution. It starts with only 1 tomo and it allows to copy taijutsu, 2 tomo allow to copy ninjutsu, and finally 3 allow it to copy all ninjutsu and genjutsu. It also allows to see chakra to some degree and distinguish the source of it. While you won't see pathways and tenketsu, you will be able to estimate general amount of it and color of it, thus distinguishing between people. When active you can see further and far clearer. You see details that are almost impossible to see, moving lips, scribbling of pencil on paper and so on. It also allows you to see what will happen and act account, but for that you also needs to train your body. Last, but not least, it allows you to cast powerful genjutsu with it and breaks any placed on you." "Cool," said Naruto, and Itachi only nodded in agreement. "I wouldn't call it like that, but you are right," said Itachi, "but there is second part of it that not many know. Tu-san probably mentioned it to you, Mangekyo Sharingan, which is a very rare thing. You are one of 3 alive Uchiha that have it and only one that can safely use it without getting blind." "Who are other 2? asked Naruto. "That would be me and Shisui," explained Itachi, and Tomo in his Sharingan started spinning faster and faster until they morphed into 3-pointed shuriken, black on the red background. It glowed menacingly when it stopped spinning, and Itachi looked at Naruto. "Can you show me yours?" Naruto only nodded. His eyes changed into red and black of Sharingan, and Tomo started spinning, faster and faster until they were blurs, and when they stopped Mangekyo Sharingan form of Naruto was visible. It had usual 3 tomo of normal Sharingan, but it also had 3-pointed pinwheel, and those tomo were between the prongs. "That's how it looks. Interesting," said Itachi, looking at it. "There are some powers of it, and unless you use them accidentally I won't show them to you, until you will be at least proficient with normal Sharingan. They are taxing on both mind and body, so I want to make sure that you know how to use the basics without delving deeper into details." "Itachi ni please," asked Naruto, pouting and making puppy eyes that worked on almost everybody. Nope, 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 said Itachi, trying not to look into those eyes as they were rather convincing. Ototo, pouting and puppy eyes won't work on me. Why? Asked Naruto. Because nope, said Itachi and looked outside, thinking how to divert attention from Sharingan and not to brought it up anytime soon. Come on, I might as well show you basics of Shuriken Jutsu. Fine, said Naruto and walked after Itachi outside, into the garden and threw it into a large, private training ground behind it. There were few tree stumps there and multiple of shuriken and kunai targets, not to mention that the ground was covered in multiple scorch marks from Kaden and Raiden Jutsu. Show me what you know, said Itachi and grabbed kunai from kunai holster on his hip. He threw it at the target that was on the opposite end of training field. Try to hit as close to it as you can. Throw 10 kunai. Let's see, said Naruto and calmed himself down, before throwing kunai, one after one. Itachi meanwhile was watching him closely and looking for any mistakes and wrong position. He grimaced when he saw a classical example of sabotaging training in subtle manner that only more experienced shinobi were able to easily notice. It was something that messed up the trajectory of projectile so completely that it was hard to believe. Naruto threw 10 kunai and most of them flied wildly all around the target, only 3 managed to hit it and only 1 got close to the middle of it. When Itachi saw it, he couldn't believe how bad was the aim of Naruto and after that replayed his technique in his mind, searching for other reasons and he spotted few more. That's the worst aim I ever saw, said Itachi and looked at Naruto. Next time, throw them when exhaling. If you are doing that when inhaling you completely mess up your aim and path if it. Try doing it again, but this time with them being thrown when exhaling. It should be somewhat better. Naruto nodded and once again thrown 10 kunai, most of which got closer to the intended target and to the middle of it. His eyes widened when he saw how much his accuracy improved by changing such simple thing. He glanced at Itachi and saw that he was smiling, which Naruto noticed was a rare thing to do for him. How it was? Naruto asked after throwing last one. Way better, said Itachi and ruffled Naruto's hair. There are several things that need to be improved, but we will tackle them one at a time. Now I think that Ka-san made lunch and that Sasuke will be anytime now inside of the district. At first words on Naruto's face appeared smile, but at the mention of second some sort of scowl. It was going to get tense. After they finished Shuriken Jutsu training, Naruto went to his room to drop off his ninja supplies and later walked to the bathroom to clean himself after that training. His whole body was aching and was covered in sweat and dirt, from being thrown around the dojo by Itachi, which wasn't the most pleasant thing that happened to him. It happened only few times as Naruto quickly learned how to avoid getting hurled across dojo, yet it still ached as hell. When Naruto was cleaned, he was wearing almost exactly the same clothes as before, but there were 2 differences. He didn't have on him any of his ninja equipment and on sleeves of his t-shirt was Wolf of Namikaze. It wasn't big as it would get attention of almost everybody, but it was there so that Naruto could have some sort of connection with his father. However, he was unaware of what he would soon receive and that it belonged to his parents and was used by them on the battlefields during multiple battles fought by them. Naruto walked to the dining room and sat at one of the places around the table, wondering how Sasuke was going to react to seeing him. If he was going to guess, he would say that Sasuke wouldn't know what was happening or what had happened. When Sasuke was in the academy he was wondering what was going on as he knew that situation in the village was rather tense and there were rumors about executions of prominent civilians, along with miscellaneous shinobi and civilians that got caught in the mix. There was also things that were going on inside of the clan. He knew that Itachi was hiding something, along with his parents. When he crossed the border of district he noticed that people that were guarding main entrance to it were tense and their Sharingan were constantly active. Like they were looking for troubles and they feared they could happen anytime soon. It caused his suspicions and curiosity to skyrocket as such things rarely happened. He was walking like nothing happened and wasn't even suspecting the surprise he was going to have the moment he was going to enter the mansion and see who was there. Sasuke entered the mansion as if nothing happened and walked up the stairs towards the part of it where they were living. He walked towards dining room and stopped dead in his tracks when he saw who was sitting to the right of Itachi. After that his eyes widened even more when he saw that he was wearing typical clothes of Uchiha. What is he doing here? He asked walking forward and pointing at Naruto. It seems you were out of the loop for last few days," said Itachi, teasing him a little. "Aniki, what do you mean by that?" asked Sasuke, slowly moving forward and eyeing Naruto carefully, who seemed not to care at all about those glances and looks he was receiving. "Itachi means by that I officially adopted Naruto," said Fugaku, because of who was his father and certain clause in last will of his father. "Who is his father?" asked Sasuke. Parentage of Naruto was kept as a secret for the sake of his security. Nobody fancied keeping away swarms of assassins, whose sole purpose was to kill an infant. "You see his sculpture every day you walk through the village," said Fugaku, causing Sasuke to stop for a moment. When he realized whom his father meant, his eyes widened with realization. It could only mean one of the 4 Hokage of the Konoha, and since 2 were dead for last 30 or so years and current one was a little too old to have such a young son, it left only one candidate. Also hair color didn't match at all. "To-san, you don't mean Namikaze Minato?" asked warily Sasuke. "Yes, I mean him. He was my half-brother and in his will, he asked me to adopt Naruto in case he unlocks Sharingan," explained Fugaku and looked at Naruto. "Can you activate your Sharingan?" "Of course, To-san," replied Naruto, and his eyes turned red and black of Sharingan. After a moment Tomos started spinning faster and faster, turning into Mangekyo form of it, causing Sasuke to get a little envy. "I think that's enough of proof," said Itachi, looking at Naruto and Sasuke. "I want both of you to be at least civil with each other." I already explained it to Naruto and he agreed to ceasefire and maybe friendship. "Of course, Aniki," said Sasuke, knowing well that arguing would be pointless. But he also sensed something in Naruto that made him wonder if that idiot who he was at the academy was his true face. He looked more confident, more firm. It was hard to explain, but he was looking completely different than at the academy, or maybe those clothes changed him so much. "Since this little thing is explained," said Fugaku, taking out long box made out of polished wood. It looked like it could store 1 or 2 sets of swords. It was hard to tell. "Those weapons should belong to you, Naruto," he added and handed it across the table to Naruto, who placed it in front of him and opened. When he peered inside, his lips managed to escape weak. Wow, inside of it were one of the most beautiful swords he ever saw. On the red velvet were laying 2 katana, with matte black scabbards on which were etched images of lunging dragons, and at the bottom of them was visible crest of Uzumaki clan. Hilt was made out of black wood, into which were encrusted small diamonds and rubies, and it was covered in red silk ribbon. Guard of the blade was shaped to resemble open head of dragon, made out of gold with rubies as eyes of it, and from which emerged actual blade, which was pitch black and was made out of version of chakra steel that was only created by blacksmiths of Uzushio, and it made them extremely hard and elastic. Breaking one was almost impossible and they were able to cut through almost any material. On the blade was etched image of lunging dragon. Besides those swords were placed 2 shorter blades, around 20 inches long. Their scabbards were made out of woof which was painted golden, and at the bottom of it was image of wolf head with red eyes. Symbol of Namikaze clan. Actual blades were masterpieces and it was obvious that they were a clan weapon. Pommel of them was shaped to resemble snarling head of wolf with 2 pieces of citrine as eyes of wolf. Handle was made out of black wood and was covered in crisscrossing pattern of red, white and black silk ribbons, colors of Uchiha and Senju clans, assuming someone was able to see them and was able to guess the meaning behind them. Guard of the blade was shaped to resemble snarling head of wolf, from which emerged actual blade. Blade was made out of rare alloy of chakra steel, one in which were embedded veins of gold and one that glowed gold when chakra was channeled through it. Are those blades of Uzushiokuge that were brought here by Uzumaki Kushina when she arrived here? I remember that she was a daughter of last Uzushiokuge and she received them from her father, asked Itachi peering inside. Those were one of the most famous weapons in the world and almost everybody heard tales or stories about them. Obviously those sabers are ones that gave Namikaze Minato his nickname, along with his jutsu. They are, said Fugaku. Last 8 years they spent closed inside of our vault and not many even knew that they were placed there. They are beautiful, said Naruto, closed the lid of it and placed it on the ground to his right. Thank you To-san. It was nothing, replied Fugaku and looked at Itachi. Can you show Naruto how to use them? Or should I ask Kakashi to do that? What about me? Asked Sasuke, who felt ignored. Why not? Swords are a handy tool in battle, said Fugaku, and Sasuke nodded. I should be able to do that. said Itachi, and considering it for a moment. I should be able to do basics with him during this week, and assuming he will have usually Uzumaki talent in relation to blades. He should grasp basics of sword fighting in 2 weeks or so. Assuming I won't use my favorite shortcut for training. Monotone things, and he is probably only person since time when Sandaime-sama was in his prime that can fully utilize it without getting killed. You don't mean Kage Bunshin? Asked Fugaku, as all Jonin and some of Chunin knew this jutsu. It was versatile and had multiple uses, but most of shinobi couldn't afford more than 1 or 2 clones. Yes, agreed Itachi, Naruto has more chakra than I have. How can Naruto have more chakra that you have? Asked Sasuke. Because of being Uzumaki through his mother. Explained Itachi. When dealing with Uzumaki, they created completely new scale to measure how much chakra they have. Average Jonin have as much as their typical genin. Their Kage had over 20 times more than our average Kage, but they had atrocious chakra control. So that's why Naruto can't make normal Bunshin? Asked Sasuke. Yes, said Itachi, and if those instructors had something that was able to think inside of their heads, they would have guessed the reason for his inability to use those jutsu and would either show him exercises that would help him with chakra control or would show him other type of Bunshin. Well, we can worry about that later. Said Makoto, important is that Naruto is here and he get proper education and training. Along with you Sasuke. They nodded and focused on eating while talking about everything and nothing. Naruto was unaware about what was waiting for him later after that lunch. Itachi managed to get himself 3 weeks long break so that he could train Naruto, and he wanted to use it to its fullest. When meal of over, Itachi told Naruto to meet him in the garden behind training field they used earlier that day. Now it was part for more boring part of training, that is academics and theory. Nothing practical, as training too much would be a bad thing to do, and he was going to introduce him to full training regime later, so that it wouldn't cover the same things as academy was, but was going alongside it, and he had planned nature manipulation and shape with him and Sasuke once Naruto was going to come back to academy, so that they would be on the same level. Good that you are here, said Itachi, noticing Naruto walking towards him. It will be something more pleasant for you than being thrown around dojo by me. Ni-san, what that will be? Asked Naruto, eager to learn something new. Theory, academics and few miscellaneous things that are rather important. Replied Itachi, and Naruto only groaned, but nodded and sat across Itachi under one of many trees that were growing in the garden and were providing shadow from afternoon sun. Itachi chose this place on purpose as he knew that there would be peace and not many would know how to find it. Especially with dozens of genjutsu he placed around it, just to make it harder to find for other people. Fine, groaned Naruto, and Itachi nodded. Let's start with something that shouldn't be boring for you and might be quite useful for you. Said Itachi and looked at Naruto, activate your Sharingan and see if you can spot my chakra. There's nothing at all, said Naruto when he saw exactly nothing. Like Itachi didn't have a chakra at all. Correct, said Itachi, there are ways to suppress the chakra and it's especially useful when you want to sneak unnoticed. Can you tell me what I did? You forced it to stay inside of your body. Half asked, half replied Naruto. Not exactly, said Itachi, normally chakra is flowing around your body without any pattern or reason. When you learn to control it, you tame it and it flows in more controlled manner. But you can force it to stay inside of pathways and only there without going outside. How can I do that? Asked Naruto. First you will need to get chakra control to decent level. Replied Itachi, talking about chakra control, you were showed leaf spinning exercise at the academy. But for you it won't work, tree walking and water walking not so much. I will show them to you, but later. First I will show you something that should do the trick. What's that? Asked Naruto. Kunai hovering exercise, it is normally learned by Jonin, medics and Anbu. Said Itachi, mainly because of amount of chakra it requires. You push chakra through tenketsu that are placed on your hand and you try to use it to keep kunai on even level above your palm. Once Naruto nodded that he understood, Itachi took out single kunai and put it above his hand and it stood there, being held by his chakra. Try the same. Naruto took the kunai from Itachi and placed it above his hand and channeled chakra, causing kunai to shot up to over 9 feet. He tried to make amount of chakra and it got lowered to 6 feet. Naruto focused on it and watched it with his active Sharingan, trying to get it under control and to lower it to decent level. After doing that for over 30 minutes, he managed to get it just tad over 4 feet above his hand. Not bad for the first time, said Itachi, watching it with attention, and he heard rustling of leaves behind him. He looked in that direction and on his face appeared smile. It was Shisui trying to find him or spying on them. It was hard to set those two things apart. Shisui, you may come out of hiding. I wondered if Naruto was going to spot me, said brown-haired teen from Uchiha clan, once he dropped onto ground in front of them. He was wearing black wide-collared t-shirt, beige shorts, and over his head was tied Hitai-8. He was a little taller than Itachi and looked like he was a year or two older. His hairs were as spiky as Naruto ones, and they were in rare for Uchiha color, that is brown. Most of them had pitch black hairs due to ancient rituals made between them and one of animal clans. Shisui, do you really think that he was going to spot you? I mean, his Sharingan is good and his skills in hiding are good. Really good, I would say. After all, he was able to throw our teams into wild goose chase all over Konoha. But being on the other side isn't the same thing, you should know that. Fine, agreed Shisui and sat on the ground. Reason why I'm here is that there are rumors flying about third Mangekyo Sharingan in the clan, and I wanted to confirm them as I also have one. You were there when Tu-san told me about Naruto having Mangekyo, so I don't see a reason in you confirming your rumors, said Itachi. Truth was that I thought I might help you with training him, said Shisui. I have over a month of break as half of my squad is in the hospital, and it will take some time to find replacements and let ones in the hospital heal. I suppose it won't be a bad thing. We all know that you are better at Kenjutsu than I am, said Itachi, and Tu-san asked me to show him how to use swords of his parents. Katana and those weird ninjutsu? Asked Shisui, and Itachi nodded. It will be a fun thing. I usually fight with 2 blades, so it will be a nice thing and easier for me than you. I guess you will do Genjutsu, Taijutsu, and some of ninjutsu. Yes, said Itachi, also basics that everybody should know and some of our customs, rest Tu-san will cover. Now we are going over basics of academics and theory. Are you completely ignoring me? Asked Naruto, getting their attention, causing Shisui to smile a little at the antics of Naruto. No, said Itachi, since you are so eager to learn, name all types of elemental chakra and tell us which is strong against which and weak against which. Kaden, Fuden, Raiden, Doden, and Suiden, said Naruto, counting them on fingers of his right hand. But about what is strong and weak against what, I don't know. We weren't taught it. Actually, it's quite easy, said Itachi, and drew the diagram with elemental chakra on the ground. It was a pentagon with elemental chakra names written at the corners of it. After that, he drew arrows from each to each. Take a look at those arrows and you will get your answer. Naruto looked for a moment at those arrows. After a moment, something clicked in his mind. Kaden is strong against Fuden and weak against Suiden. Fuden is strong against Raiden and weak against Kaden. Raiden is weak against Fuden and strong against Doden. Suiden is strong against Kaden and weak against Doden. Doden is weak against Raiden and strong against Suiden. Correct. There are also several Kekkei Genkai, but they aren't important right now, and you will learn about the in the academy, or I will tell you later when working with Mangekyo, as it might have one, said Itachi, and looked at Shisui. What are his affinities in your opinion? He looks like Raiden and Fuden, but all Uchiha have Kaden as well. So he may have all 3 of them, said Shisui, but until you check it nobody will know. If he will have 3, it will be an interesting challenge. I'm betting on the same ones, said Itachi, and rummaged through his pockets, until he found a piece of paper. Channel your chakra into it, he said, handing it to Naruto. Naruto took the paper from Itachi and channeled his chakra into it. When he did that, it split in 2, half of it being burned to ash in extremely white flame, while second wrinkled. Can you explain to me what just happened? Asked Naruto, when he noticed widened eyes of Itachi and Shisui. They were good at hiding emotions, but having 3 affinities at the age of 8 was a rare thing to have, an extremely precious one as well. You have 3 affinities, said Itachi once he overcame his shock. Fuden, Raiden, and Kaden. Kaden and Raiden being major ones, while Fuden minor one. I think I will show you basic exercises that will help you with control of them, once we are done with normal chakra control. They can be dangerous if improperly handled, and without decent chakra control you won't do much. I have Kaden and Raiden ones, while I believe that Shisui have Fuden and Kaden. Yes, I have Fuden, Said Shisui, it's one of the rarest affinities to have in Konoha, if I remember correctly only 20 ninja have it. Yes, but we are getting sidetracked. Said Itachi, noticing incoming storm of questions, and he wanted to stop it before being buried in those questions. I want you to practice that kunai hovering for another 30 minutes and do that each day before you go to sleep. Tomorrow I will show you a workout I would like you to follow, and before I forgot, I will wake you up when I will think it will be a good time to start training. In your room you should have books on clan history and customs, look through them, now you are free to go. Naruto disappeared the moment Itachi told him he could go. He is a good kid. Said Shisui, and he fits here. Yes, said Itachi, it's a shame that he couldn't be brought up here from the moment he was born. But training him is so much fun, sometimes he picks up things once he sees them only once, and sometimes I need to show it few times. He is way better than Sasuke, who is boring to teach, you show it once and he learns it almost immediately. So that's why you are so eager to train him? Asked Shisui. Yes, replied Itachi, also he is interesting kid. You should like him rather quickly. How long are you planning to train him before allowing him to once again attend the academy? Asked Shisui. 3 or 4 weeks, replied Itachi, depends how quickly he will be learning, how much I will need to show him, and how much mistakes or errors made by academy instructors I will need to correct. I knew it was bad, but I never know how bad it was. Said Shisui. Honestly, it's not that bad. Said Itachi, good thing that I simply told him to ignore Tiger Fist, we both know he is fighting with it. And with Interceptor Fist he will be a lot more effective. Be tomorrow around 8 in the morning in dojo, I would like to see him sparring with someone else. I will be, said Shisui, and they talked for few more minutes. Naruto, after Itachi told him that he was free to go, he ran back to the house and walked to his room, where he sat on the floor by the window and looked through scrolls and books placed on shelves in the room. Most of them were, as Itachi told, about clan customs and history. He picked up one about history and started reading it. It was about more recent history from creation of Konoha to the end of the reign of Yondaime Hokage, that is a little over 70 years of history. 15 of Shadaime, 15 of Nadaime, 30 of Sandaime, and tad over 10 years of the Yondaime. He read it until it was quite late, and after that he dragged his futon from cupboard that was hidden in one of the walls, placed it on the floor of the room. Drawn curtains over the windows, changed into his pajama and jumped to sleep. But before doing that, he took weapons of his parents from the box in which they were given to him and placed them in their scabbards and onto a weapon stand that was placed in the corner of the room. Everything was a little sore and he was exhausted, but for the first time in ages he felt secure and safe. Previously he couldn't truly rest during the night as he could be attacked at night, so his body was tense all the time, and here he could relax and tensed muscles released and his body drifted into deep sleep. One where he wasn't haunted by nightmares and could soundly sleep in truly his bed and in one that was comfortable. And without a fear of being attacked at night, which also helped a lot as he could relax his muscles and nerves, which previously even at night were tense. In the morning Naruto woke up right after a sunrise. He could see its rays entering his room through scarlet curtains covering his window and bathing the room with all shades of red. He yawned and looked around as he felt it was early, yet he was full of energy and well rested. Not like he was previously, when in the morning he was half asleep and was almost devoid of any energy. He glanced onto a clock that was on the wall and decided to get some more sleep. After all, he could sleep even more, and it was 7 in the morning. Which wasn't the best time to wake up and do some things, it was a time to rest. He once again closed his eyes and went to sleep, only to wake up moments later with a scream when jet of ice-cold water hit him in the face. Naruto woke up with a scream, jumping out of his futon only to find Itachi looking at him and standing in the doors of the room, his fingers in a shape of one of hand seals. On his lips was visible some sort of smile, but it was hard to tell with all of those shadows and weird light patterns. "Ni-san, what was that?" asked annoyed Naruto, when he shook water of himself and looked at Itachi who was standing there. "Wake up call," only replied Itachi, "meet me in our dojo in 30 minutes, take your swords there." After those words Itachi disappeared from the room, causing Naruto to groan. He was being pulled away from him precious sleep and he wasn't happy. 30 minutes later Naruto was dressed and after healthy breakfast, he was waiting for Itachi in their dojo, while looking at those blades that were on the ground in front of him. He took them out of their scabbards and looked at them under the light, admiring their Beauty and quality of craftsmanship. Naruto heard footsteps on the wooden floor and looked towards source of those noises, and if he was right, there were two sources of them, and he was right as he saw Itachi and Shisui walking towards him. Shisui was carrying on his back two blades, as Naruto was able to see the harness keeping them on his back and hilts of those blades sticking out over his shoulders. "Ohayo Naruto-kun," said Shisui, once he was standing beside him and looked at the swords laying on the floor in front of Naruto. "Ohayo Shisui-san," replied Naruto, causing Shisui to roll his eyes. "Don't use, san, with my name," said Shisui. "If you really want to use it, use, kun, or, ni. Technically I'm your second cousin, but I and Itachi are like brothers, so Sasuke is used to calling me ni-san and I won't mind if you are going to use it." "Okay Shisui ni," said Naruto, and Shisui nodded. "Good, that's better," said Shisui, as he hated honorifics when dealing with friends or close family. "Since pleasantries are out of the way," said Itachi, getting their attention. "Shisui, can you spar with Naruto, so I can spot any mistakes?" "Sure," agreed Shisui, and both of them walked to the middle of the dojo and fell into opening stance of their style. Their Sharingan slowly spinning and looking for openings. Naruto was first to charge at Shisui, who watched him with curiosity and started blocking or dodging those attacks, allowing Itachi to see if there were any mistakes in them. It was easier to spot them in such manner, because you saw it from the side and could fully focus on the form, instead of thinking how to attack the enemy. "That's enough," said Itachi, after watching them for few minutes as they were clashing around the dojo and fighting each other. He didn't want to tire out Naruto, at least not quickly. They nodded and stopped fighting. Naruto had few bruises and was covered in sweat, but excluding that, he looked like nothing at all happened to him. "You did quite well, also some nice and unpredictable combinations of strikes. You need to work on polishing your katana on your body." "What do you mean by body?" asked Naruto, unaware of trap into which he was walking. "Working out," replied Itachi. "I would like you to do some light workout, 30 push-ups, squats, jog or 2 around the district, and whatever else you might want to add into the mix. Just do not overwork yourself, you don't want to suffer from the effects of it. They're not pleasant." "I will try to do that," said Naruto, and Itachi nodded. "Good," said Itachi and looked at him. "Now I think it's time to show you how to properly use those overgrown knives you got." "Overgrown knives?" asked somewhat amused Shisui. "We both know that they're far more deadly than normal kunai, which should be easily cut in half by them." "Fine," agreed Itachi and looked at Naruto. "You probably won't be able to use both of katana as they are a little too large for you, but you shouldn't have any big problems with those sabers and one katana, but using two simultaneously will be too hard. Next question is how you want to carry them around. You have several options, best ones are on the belt or in the similar harness that Shisui uses." Naruto thought for a moment before he decided on one that he was going to use. "I think I will go for harness." "Rather good choice," commented Itachi. "Easy to access and they won't get in your way when dodging or doing some taijutsu attacks." "Talking about it," said Shisui, looking through package he had with himself. He got out of it something covered by cloth and threw it at Naruto, who caught it and uncovered. When Naruto saw it, his eyes gleamed with excitement. It was a proper harness to carry such swords on user back with attachment points for attaching scabbards to it so that they wouldn't move and they could be easily accessible. Also, it was made in such way that it could be easily modified as user was growing, and at the front of it was visible Uchiha crest. It was made out of tough leather and with several metal reinforcements to make it tougher. "Thanks Shisui ni," said Naruto. "No problem kiddo," said Shisui and looked at those blades, picking them up and inspecting them closely. They were masterpieces and it looked like they were well taken care of and were ready to be used. "Now, as Itachi probably said, I'm going to be the one that will show you how to use them safely. He is a good swordsman, as all Anbu are, but I learned it before joining Anbu, so I have way more experience with it, and especially with those types of swords." "Go on," said Naruto, listening and being focused on what Shisui was saying. He was explaining to him how to properly wield the sword and how to maintain one so that it would never dull or get damaged in other way. Hours turned into days and days turned into weeks, and first 2 weeks of Naruto being with Uchiha clan were interesting for him, and he started slowly integrating into Uchiha clan, most of which happily accepted him as one of their own. Currently he was seen sparring in Kenjutsu against Sasuke. They were using only one sword as opposed to normal two Naruto used, as Itachi wanted to give them even chances. Naruto sidestepped thrust aimed towards his chest and replied with his own lunge aimed at Sasuke's arm, who avoided it without any problems. He simply ducked under it and let it harmlessly pass above its designed target. "It seems that you are not going to learn that such things won't work on me," said Sasuke once he was once again standing on the floor of dojo, after that dodge of last strike. "Tisk, I hoped it would work," replied Naruto and threw his sword into his left hand, surprising Sasuke a lot as he didn't expect such thing. He knew that Naruto was a duelist but he expected him to favor one hand. "I thought that you preferred your right hand," said Sasuke, when he saw that move. "I do, but I also know how to use it with my left hand," replied Naruto and renewed his attacks on Sasuke, who was managing to block most of them, and ones he wasn't able to block, he was at least able to evade. It was an even duel, but it was obvious that Naruto was more natural with his sword and he knew how to use it. "That's enough," said Itachi after few more minutes. Sasuke and Naruto seemed to get along okay, but they still were competing with each other a lot. "You both fight rather well and it seems that you manage to get better." Sasuke, nice idea with that thrust, but in normal fight you would get beheaded easily. Naruto, not a bad idea with switching hands in the middle of fight, it usually unsettle your enemy. Both of them nodded as heating their swords in scabbards that were on their backs. "Naruto, meet me on the training ground outside in 30 minutes. I want to introduce you to Sharingan Genjutsu and more advanced things you can do with it." "What about me?" asked Sasuke, who managed to unlock his Sharingan during one of more heated duels, where it helped him to dodge under the blade aimed at his head. "It won't work with your soul Tomo, you will need 3 for it to work as it should," explained Itachi. "Also some of them require Mangekyo and you won't have it any time soon, while Naruto has it and it's better for him to be able to control it. If getting angry he could set someone on fire by accident and that fire is impossible to extinguish, so it's better that he learns how to control it." "I see your point," said Sasuke and nodded. He appreciated the fact that Naruto got adopted by his father, as Itachi was somewhat more eager to show him thing or two while training Naruto. Also he was impressed by what Naruto managed to do. He wasn't going to admit that any time soon, but he suspected that Naruto knew that. 30 minutes later Naruto was waiting for Itachi on the training ground behind the house. He was sitting there and looking towards the Hokage monument that was visible in the distance. It was one of the best views that he had from here. He somewhat changed from the time he joined Uchiha clan. Those were only 2 short or long weeks, depending on your point of view. For Naruto they passed in a blink of his eye. He started properly eating and first changes in his body became visible. It got covered by thin and rapidly growing layer of muscles, also it was starting to catch up on lost growth in height. His outfit also slightly changed. Now he was wearing gloves on his hands. They were with metal plates on the outside with Uchiha fan etched in them, also his arms were protected by vambraces. They were slightly over the elbow and they were made out of high-quality steel and were designed to protect against all kinds of attacks that could land on his forearm, but also so that he could use them to block sword strikes. On Naruto's back now there were scabbards in which were placed his sabers and his katana. They were kept in place by harness that he got from Shisui. He looked a lot like a proper shinobi now, not a wannabe that wanted to be one. "What do you know about Genjutsu?" asked Itachi, when he noticed where Naruto was and joined him there. "You should learn about them in the academy or at least manage to find enough in books or scrolls around the house. They mess with your senses," said Naruto, trying to remember what he learned about them from books and in the academy. "Yeah, and they can be placed," drawled Itachi, hoping that Naruto would guess what he meant. "In our case using our eyes, but also sound, hands, basically everything. Depends on your creativity." "Yes," agreed Itachi, "I'm going to show you 2 genjutsu that are on their own almost useless and harmless, but their true power shows when you combine them with other things. You need to use them without shouting the name of it, as when you announce genjutsu everybody is doing their best to cancel it." "I guess it makes sense," said Naruto. Now talking about those 2 jutsu. Itachi explained to Naruto what was the purpose of those 2 genjutsu and how they should be used during battles with maximum efficiency. He shouldn't need them at the academy, but some people there were rather unpredictable and known for fighting dirty. So having a surprise or two in the store for them wasn't a bad thing to have. Final week of Naruto leave from the academy passed too quickly for him and he was going to start once again attending it tomorrow. And since he was now an Uchiha he was supposed to excel in whatever he was doing. Currently whole family was sitting around the table and eating late dinner. It got delayed because of Itachi fighting Sasuke and Naruto at the same time. Mainly to show them how to combine each other attacks during Taijutsu fight, but also so that they could have some fun and to learn how to trust each other. They were getting along with each other, but they seemed still to be a little bit wary of each other. At least it was way better than it was previously when they looked at each other with anger and hate. Now it almost completely disappeared from their eyes. "Naruto," said Fugaku, getting his attention, "we would like you to try your best. Uchiha are supposed to excel at everything we do, but for now I want you to try your hardest." "Same for you Sasuke. I will try," said Naruto. "It's getting boring, I mean I like to train with Itachi ni, but too much is boring." "To-san, did you mention to them what I planned for them for their holidays?" asked Itachi looking at Fugaku. "No, it was going to be surprise from you for their holidays," said Fugaku, causing Naruto to look at Itachi, questions visible in his eyes. "Aniki," said Naruto, looking at Itachi, "you know that we are going to get it out of you faster or later." "Let's see," said Itachi, getting attention of Naruto and Sasuke. "I thought that you might like to get some more serious training and we are going for a training trip, deep into Hai no Kuni. Isn't that a bit risky?" asked Makoto, knowing well how dangerous could be such things. "Ka-san, we won't be going alone," replied Itachi. "Shisui is also going with us, but you will learn details once academy is over and in the meantime I will be teaching you as much as I can." When Itachi explained what was going to happen, Naruto and Sasuke jaws were wide open. They didn't expect that kind of surprise and it was a nice incentive to work their hardest. "But now have a fun and enjoy the academy," said Makoto, and they nodded, while eating their meals. "I hope you won't cause too much havoc in the academy." "I will try not to," said Naruto, "but I won't promise anything. It will be an interesting time," said Itachi. Only reply from Naruto was typical Uchiha, which he was learning to recognize and understand. For the outsiders they were impossible to distinguish from each other and they sounded exactly the same. Yet Uchiha were able to pass a lot of information with usage of their Sharingan and which was annoying others to no end. On the next day Naruto woke up early when the first light was looking through the windows into his room. He shaken off remains of sleep in his dreams rather easily. He was really excited about today and what would happen. He expected rather interesting reactions from other students from his class. Quickly taking the shower and dressing into his usual clothes with his swords on his back and hoping that he wouldn't need to use them as they could easily give away whose son he was. Assuming certain Nara wouldn't dig into data about previous Hokage and that civilian council was silent, which were almost impossible things to happen. He walked downstairs and quickly ate his breakfast, his excitation visible in way he behaved. He managed to get control over his emotions when he was training with Itachi and now he used those tricks to curb them a little. He calmed himself down and his chakra stopped being so visible and it got hidden inside of his body as it should. "I wonder how many people will try to challenge you," said Sasuke, looking at the Naruto. He remembered that he got his ass handed to him by Naruto during their recent Taijutsu spar. "Probably civilians and Inuzuka Kiba," replied Naruto, while focusing on his breakfast. "It will be fun to watch," said Sasuke. "I prefer watching him demolish someone else than being demolished." "It wasn't that bad," said Itachi, "you are even and it's hard to tell which one of you is better." Sasuke only nodded and finished his meal. When he did that he walked outside and waited for Naruto, who grabbed his bag and walked after Sasuke. Excluding color of their hair and eyes, it was almost impossible to tell them apart. When Naruto finished, he joined Sasuke outside and they calmly walked out of the mansion and through the district, heading towards the academy. When they crossed the line that was a border between the district and the village, looks and glances sent at them changed. Especially one sent towards Naruto, but nobody seemed to do anything too rash, as they knew it could end badly. Especially when done in bright light and with so many witnesses, when they were walking like such and completely ignoring others, as they were chatting with each other. Once they entered the academy they headed for their classroom, ignoring all stares and looks sent at them and walked into their classroom, which still was empty. They took seats at the end of top row, doing nothing and trying to kill their time. It was boring few minutes as they waited for other people to arrive. While they were doing that, Naruto took out their textbook and skimmed it seeing what would be today's topic. When he saw it he yawned out of boredom. He expected something more useful or interesting. Shikamaru entered the classroom and moment he did that, he stopped in his tracks when his eyes landed on two people sitting by the window and wearing clothes with Uchiha crest. One of them had bright yellow hair and when Shikamaru saw that his eyes widened in realization and shock. He didn't expect to see Naruto sitting together with Sasuke and not killing each other, much less him being a member of Uchiha. He blinked a few times just to make sure he was seeing things right. He walked to his seat and watched the entrance to the room as he was trying to predict people's reaction upon seeing Naruto. However, he also took a closer look at the Naruto and noticed on his wrist bracelet with rather interesting symbols that ringed some bells in his head, like he knew those symbols from somewhere, yet he couldn't remember from where. He knew they were important, but he didn't know why and it annoyed him a lot as he was supposed to be a Nara and they were supposed to know everything. Next to enter was Sakura. When she entered the classroom she stopped and noticed who was sitting beside Sasuke. When she did that, on her forehead appeared vein and she marched towards him. For her he didn't deserve to be an Uchiha. He was a baka and knucklehead, not an actual ninja so he should be not sitting there, certainly not in those clothes with Uchiha fan on them. It seems that one of your fangirls is coming here. Cheerfully said Naruto, when he saw Sakura. Replied Sasuke and it meant, yes, you are right. It will be fun, said Naruto and in his eyes appeared Sharingan, glowing menacingly as he was taught by Itachi to do when attempting to scare someone. They usually worked really well when trying to unsettle the enemy. It caused an Uchiha to look like a monster, not a human, especially at night when only his glowing eyes were visible, while rest of his body was being hidden by shadows and darkness. Sakura walked forward and towards Naruto. He was going to pay for getting those Sharingan and getting into Uchiha clan. He didn't deserve anything, he should beg for everything that he was receiving. Yet here he sat with those fancy swords on his back and with Sharingan and looked like a prince. You baka, yelled Sakura, finally getting attention of Naruto, how do you dare to steal Sharingan? She tried to punch Naruto, but when her punch connected with his body, it turned into a flock of crows that scattered across the room and after a moment converged behind his chair. Meanwhile scaring everybody else in the room that wasn't used to such genjutsu. Sasuke looked at those crows with mild interest. He saw them a couple of times when they were sparring Itachi and they looked dangerous. Per se they weren't dangerous, but when combined with proper attacks they were extremely dangerous. Sakura jumped away in fear from Naruto, as she didn't expect such turn of events and looked at Naruto, who seemed to ignore her and went back to sitting in his seat and was somewhat asleep, at least guessing by his head resting on his arms. Are you ignoring me? Yelled Sakura, veins on her forehead bulging out and ready to burst open. Yes he is, said Sasuke. Noticing Naruto was ignoring her, Sasuke learned how to somehow read Naruto, but it still was a hard thing to do for him. Leave him alone. At least he had more luck with that than rest of people, only Itachi had more luck with reading Naruto. Sakura became somewhat subdued when she heard what Sasuke told her and she nodded, although she was still sore and angry. Rest of people entered the room and soon the class started, while Naruto was happily trying to take a nap. Naruto, wake up, yelled Iruka and threw a piece of chalk at Naruto, whose eyes snapped open and flashed red, while he caught that piece of chalk with one hand. Which chakra nature is weak against Kaden? It's easy, said Naruto, yawning and annoying Iruka. Fuden. You're correct, weakly said Iruka, shocked that Naruto knew about chakra natures. Before few weeks ago, he was a complete knucklehead and now he knew the things even moments after woken up. Which was a weird thing for him to do, but he guessed that being adopted into Uchiha clan had some positive effects on him and the fact that his appearance changed, sure it had. Naruto after that went back to taking a nap, or at least he seemed to be taking one. He watched with mild interest as Iruka was explaining chakra natures and how they influenced each other. Naruto focused on them, the moment Iruka touched upon Kekkei Genkai. Kekkei Genkai are rare bloodlines that give certain powers to some ninja clans or families. Started Iruka, getting attention of everybody in the room, as a Kekkei Genkai were an interesting topic and one that always was getting attention of everybody. They can be divided into two groups, one which allows person to mix two basic elements of chakra to create new one. For example, Doden in Sweden will create Mokuten or Raiden in Sweden will make Rantan. There are also other types of Kekkei Genkai, ones that can be divided into another two groups. One are Dojutsu and second are the rest. Dojutsu are Byakugan of Hyuga clan and Sharingan of Uchiha clan. Second group of them are ones connected with special abilities, for example control over the bugs of Aburame clan or control over the shadow of Nara clan. They can't be learned by the people from the outside of respective clan and they are closely guarded secret of each clan. For the next week I want you to write 5 pages on chosen Kekkei Genkai, advantages, disadvantages of it and how you can use them during the battle. After the break we will have practical training. They nodded and scattered to quietly ate their lunches and Shikamaru went after Naruto. Who are you? Asked Shikamaru, when he was close to Naruto. Those things on your bracelet seem familiar, yet I can't locate from where I know them. Maybe because they are visible in our Hitai 8. Suggested Naruto, pointing at the Hitai 8 of random shinobi that passed through the street in front of them. I guess you were right. Said Shikamaru, although he wasn't convinced by it, which worried Naruto a little as he didn't want to talk about who his father was. And he knew that if Nara wanted answers he would get them, also this little fact that Shikaku would know and even if he didn't know, he would guess the moment he saw Naruto in those clothes and with that armband. Good, said Naruto, let's head back as it seems it's start of taijutsu training. It will be troublesome, said Shikamaru and added way quieter, he is hiding something from me, don't know what and why, but he does that. Naruto heard those words, but he let them slip as he knew that if he would react to them, it would raise even more suspicions and caused even more questions. And as Itachi said, Nara that is searching for an answer is the worst type of Nara, so for his own sake he shouldn't give Shikamaru information that could cause further questions which would be a troublesome, as Nara liked to say. They walked back to their classroom and instead of tiers of seats that were previously, now it was covered in training mats and seats were removed, thanks to some seals that were placed in the walls of the room. In the middle of the room was made space for sparring. This training would be in form of 1vs1 fights, students with similar prowess in taijutsu would be paired together. Boys with boys and girls with girls, later they would fight without caring for gender, but that would be during 3rd and 4th year of the academy. Rules are clear. Announced Uruka, only taijutsu, no ninjutsu, clan fighting styles are allowed. First fight will be between Inuzuka Kiba and Uchiha Naruto. Naruto gave harness with his swords to Sasuke, walked to the middle of the room and looked at Kiba, who looked like your typical young and loud Inuzuka. Everybody believed that he was better than Naruto and that he should easily beat Naruto. Only Sasuke leaned back and looked at what was going to happen, wondering how much time it would take for Naruto to send Kiba into the hospital. He knew that his brother was strong, but didn't know how strong compared to other academy students. It seemed that Akamaru sensed what was going to happen and decided not to sit on Kiba's head as he usually did and instead jumped into the lap of Ino, much to her surprise. It seems that your Ninken knows what will happen. Teased him Naruto, shocked by the behavior of Akamaru, but he wasn't going to let it pass by. It was a too good of an occasion to mess with Kiba. I won't need Akamaru to beat you. Replied Kiba, I'm much better than you. After those words he charged at Naruto, who evaded his charge and looked at him with some amusement visible in his cerulean blue eyes. You don't seem to be that much better, Kiba-chan. Teased him Naruto and waited for another attack. This one was designed to make him forget about common sense and logic, instead to force him to fight without any plan or logic. Such people were easier to beat, way easier in fact. Tisk, said Kiba with some annoyance, you were just lucky. After those words Kiba charged at Naruto, who snorted in amusement. He looked at Kiba with look that could be translated, are you really that stupid? This time Naruto decided to end it quickly and without too much of the show. His eyes morphed into red and black of the Sharingan, which caused a lot of shocked looks. Kiba was unfazed by them and continued his attack at Naruto. When Naruto saw that Kiba won't stop, he brought his left hand to block incoming strike and used his second hand to deliver punch to Kiba gut. Which didn't knock him out, only shocked him and everybody in the audience as they didn't expect to see that, only one that wasn't shocked was Sasuke. As he knew what was going to happen, it was one of typical katas of interceptor fist and it was often used in such situations. It wasn't dangerous, but it could quickly evolve into much more dangerous set of katas. Did you say anything about being lucky? Asked Naruto, unsettling him even more. There was something in him that said danger and many looked at him in wonder what was going on. Before his disappearance he wasn't so calm and was a dead last. Here he was calm and collected, also there were signs of typical Uchiha arrogance, not to mention that his knowledge and abilities level skyrocketed. Yes, you are just lucky, shouted Kiba and once again charged at Naruto, causing him to sigh dramatically. It was becoming boring. Naruto waited for good opportunity for the attack and when it came, he sent powerful kick aimed at the chest of Kiba, which sent him back and he landed on the ground little dazed and it was obvious that he lost this fight. Winner is Uchiha Naruto, said Iruka and nodded in direction of Naruto, making sure to pair him with someone stronger during their next taijutsu training. Probably Choji or Sasuke. I thought you were going to beat him faster, said Sasuke, handing Naruto harness with his swords. I wanted to have some fun and let him fight, replied Naruto, pulling out of the harness one of his sabers and looking at it under the light. They were glowing gold when he was doing so and were drawing everybody's attention as such blades were rare and usually they were handed inside of the clan. Receiving one of such rare blades was a great honor for one that was receiving it and it was also a sign of trust placed onto him by one that gave it to him. Shikamaru looked at those swords that Naruto had as they seemed somewhat familiar and they looked like he should really know them from somewhere and there was a strange sensation in the back of his mind telling him that he knew them, or at least he heard about them. Those neon yellow hair and those blue eyes seemed to be somewhat connected, he didn't know how or why, but they were connected with those sabers. This will be the last fight of the day, announced Iruka, Uchiha Sasuke vs Akamichi Choji. Sasuke walked to the middle of the field and looked at Choji with some interest, thinking how to beat him. He was an Akamichi which meant a lot of strong punches, but he was slow and not really agile. Which was perfect for him as he was faster one and one that was fighting using the style designed around dodging and evading strikes. Sasuke estimated the size of the field, trying to assess what he had in terms of field to play. He didn't have a lot of it, which meant that he would need to be extremely careful with his moves as such punch could send him onto the ground or knock out easily in matter of seconds. And that left him only with one option that would work, that is Sharingan and using something that Aniki showed him with Genjutsu placed by it. They were not going to be as strong as ones placed by mature one, but for this case they were enough. What is he doing? Asked Shikamaru, when he saw that Sasuke was methodically and slowly attacking Choji, while not being hit back. Ocular Genjutsu, explained Naruto, whose eyes were blazing red and were looking at Sasuke. He knew that in head-on fight he doesn't stand a chance, so he decided to use Genjutsu to hide himself behind it and strike from the cover of it. So that's why Choji doesn't know what's going on, said Shikamaru. Yes, replied Naruto, when he sees right hook, in reality Sasuke is preparing to kick him. And so on. It's hard thing to fully master as one good hit and it breaks, also fully matured Sharingan helps with it. Interesting thing, said Shikamaru and Naruto nodded in agreement and went back to watching the spar as it unfolded in front of him. Sasuke managed to land a couple of good punches at Choji and forced him to forfeit. Winner is Uchiha Sasuke, announced Iruka when he saw that the fight was over and Choji forfeited, which honestly speaking was the best thing to do for him. He didn't have a chance to win against Sasuke, so he retreated unbeaten. Rest of the day has quickly passed for throwing practice, which was a little boring, at least in Naruto and Sasuke opinion as they were used to throwing at much smaller further set targets. So scoring a bullseye wasn't a hard thing to do for them and they were almost constantly doing that. I mean Sasuke was doing that. Naruto was hitting close to the middle of target, but he wasn't constantly hitting bullseye as was Sasuke. When they finished it, they were met by Itachi who officially was there to pick them up, but in reality he had other reasons for his presence there. To pay a visit to the headmaster. Flashback. Uchiha Itachi knew that the academy was going to manipulate grades received by Naruto, so he decided to pay them a visit and politely remind them that such thing would have unpleasant consequences for ones responsible for it. It was the main reason why he decided to pay them a visit before he was going to pick up his younger brothers. If he wanted to, he could be an intimidating figure and as such he was a perfect person to speak with them, of course politely without mentioning what would happen to them if they were going to fail to comply with those humble requests. He walked through the halls of the academy, heading towards the administrative part of it, and while he was walking through it, he could easily see rapidly paling teachers and instructors. It looked like they were hiding something from him and they didn't like him poking around the place. Seems that I will need to be more forceful in what I'm going to do, thought Itachi, while watching reaction of people around them. He was an Anbu and as such he needed to be able to read their emotions or what they were thinking. Here he was seeing that they guessed the reason why he was here and wanted him as far from it as possible. He walked to the headmaster office and gently knocked, waiting for the signal to enter. When heard it, he slid doors open and walked inside. Headmaster paled a little when he saw who was standing in front of him. It was Uchiha Itachi, son of Uchiha Fugaku and current heir to Uchiha clan, not to mention that he was an Anbu captain. "How may I help you, Uchiha-sama?" he politely asked, yet it was obvious that it was a wonder that he didn't stutter and managed to say a coherent sentence. "Takeshi-san," said Itachi, sitting in the chair opposing desk of Takeshi. "It came to my attention that you aren't treating one of my brothers fairly. May you clarify it a little?" asked Takeshi, not sure if he understood it right. "I mean Uchiha Naruto," calmly said Itachi. "I was training him a little during last 3 weeks and he seemed to be a bright and intelligent student, yet his reports are suggesting he is the worst student of his class. Which meant either he wasn't paying any attention or someone was sabotaging him. I'm not sure if I'm understanding what you said correctly," said Takeshi. "You said that he was being taught wrong." "Yes, I mean that," said Itachi. This Chunin was getting onto his nerves and it was a bad sign for him. "I can't believe that. I try to ensure that everybody is treated equally." "It seems you can't accomplish that," said Itachi. "I will be watching and if I will see that he is being taught wrong or in other ways sabotaged I will be less than polite." "Of course Uchiha-sama," said Takeshi with a low bow. Itachi only nodded and left the room, walking to the ground in front of the academy. He stood in the shadows of large tree growing there and waiting for those he was supposed to pick up. Standing there he was able to see them walking towards him. End of the flashback. "Itachi ni," said Naruto and Sasuke when they saw their older brother waiting for them. He looked somewhat happy, although reading his face was even a challenge for them. He was currently wearing beige shorts, black wide-collared t-shirt and on his forehead was visible his Hitai 8. He was also carrying full set of his ninja tools. "Hey runts," cheerfully said Itachi. "How was it?" "Boring," replied Sasuke. "Maybe for you," said Naruto. "Beating Kiba in a taijutsu spar was a fun thing to do." "It seems that your training is paying off," said Itachi. "Yes," agreed Naruto and looked in some amusement as people looked in their direction. With some respect, they seemed to ignore him and Sasuke, and instead were focused on Itachi. "And we need to write 5 pages on chosen Kekkei Genkai. Which one are you going to write about?" asked Itachi. "Probably Uzumaki 1, probably 3/4 of class will write about Sharingan," said Naruto. "Uzumaki 1? asked Sasuke with raised eyebrow. "Chakra chains," explained Itachi. "It might be a good idea to test you, if you can manifest them. They could be rather useful thing to have." "What about you Sasuke?" "Sharingan," simply replied Sasuke and Itachi nodded. It would be a very easy thing for him to write about. After all he was one from the Uchiha clan and wielder of it. "You know it is boring?" asked him Naruto. Only replied Sasuke, which could be translated either as, "Yes, I know," or as, "No, it isn't boring." Shikamaru's suspicions weren't letting him focus on anything. They were constantly nagging him about those sabers and their connection with those cerulean blue eyes and blonde, almost yellow hair. Like they were more connected that they looked to be connected with each other. It looked like he was missing something obvious. "San, can we speak?" Shikamaru asked his father, Shikaku, who was Jonin commander of the Konohagakure and second in command of whole ninja forces of it. He was one of the closest advisors to current Hokage and was a friend of previous one. They were sitting on the porch surrounding inner garden of Nara compound and were playing shogi, which was usual pastime activity for all Nara to do. "Of course Shika," said Shikaku and looked at Shikamaru, noticing troubles and worries visible in his body posture, or more probably troubles with finding an answer, which was a typical thing for all Nara to have. "What do you need?" "Naruto got some swords and they look like I should know them, yet I don't know," said Shikamaru and Shikaku eyes narrowed. Those could be only one set of blades. Considering that he was adopted into the Uchiha clan, it made sense that he was given them. Not many swords could be given to him. They glowed gold when light hit them. Added after a moment Shikamaru, and he has this bracelet with weird wolf head and spiral. Shikaku stroked his beard wondering if things he was hearing were right. If they were right, Naruto got those two sabers and was told about his parentage. It was almost certain that Fugaku told him about Minato, probably didn't mention Kyuubi, as he wouldn't be ready yet. Probably not any time soon. Wolf head you say, said Shikaku, gears in his head slowly turning. They were starting to get faster and faster as he was thinking about it. Wolf was a sign of only a Namikaze clan, spiral could only mean Uzumaki. Yes, To-san, said Shikamaru, knowing well that he was asking the right questions to the right person. I know the meaning behind those symbols, said Shikaku, choosing the words extremely carefully. Yet, I can't reveal them due to security reasons. I won't discourage you from looking for answers to your questions, but in this case you need to be careful and do not talk openly about what you have found. If you will find anything, confront me or Naruto in private. He can get killed if it will get openly known. It will be troublesome, said Shikamaru and nodded. They finished the game and he walked towards library that was inside of the compound as he knew that it was one of the best sources of data about famous shinobi and fighting styles. So digging there would provide plenty of interesting results and one that could be rather enlightening. What is so important that you requested this meeting? Asked Mitokado Homura, looking at the headmaster of the academy, standing in front of civilian council. They somehow omitted Shinobi Council, and didn't invite it for this meeting. Uchiha Itachi made rather pointed threats about what is going to happen if I won't be sabotaging that demon brat. Said pale Takeshi. I see, said Udatane Kaharu, thank you for that report. You are dismissed. He waited for the Chunin to disappear from the room before looking at the rest of council. We need to do something or situation will completely slip out of our control. Also that demon shouldn't be allowed to live any longer. Udatane-sama, what about using our guards to kidnap Naruto? Suggested Haruno Mebuki. That might work, excellent suggestion Haruno-san, said Kaharu. This meeting continued for several more minutes until they reached agreement upon several points. This academy is so boring, groaned Naruto, when he was reading about Kekkei Genkai that he could have, called Kongo Fusa, sealing chains. It was supposed to be one of the most powerful Kekkei Genkai ever known and was able to tame full Biju without too much of a struggle. I agree, added Sasuke, who was sparring with Itachi and Taijutsu and trying to hit him, which so far wasn't happening at all. There is also earlier graduation, said Itachi, while blocking punch from Sasuke. Inside of his head gears were slowly turning. He knew that in terms of ninja arts they were more than ready to graduate, problem was with the mental side of things. He knew about darker sides of the ninja life and he didn't want them to see it so soon. Officially it isn't there, but if you show enough of prowess in ninja arts and are ready to graduate, you can do so. I don't think you will be able to graduate this year, but the next one is the possibility. HN, said Naruto and looked at Sasuke, who was getting thrown onto the tatami mats that were covering the floor. He was trying to understand this Kongo Fusa and he was supposed to be able to shape his chakra into a chain and manifest it outside his own body. It seemed that he was missing something, as he was able to force chakra into such shape, yet he wasn't able to get them out of his body, which was a strange thing. Don't be so annoyed, said Itachi, while trying to keep Sasuke away from hitting him. I graduated early as it was a middle of war and we needed everybody we could get. Now we finally have some peace, so graduation age was set higher and you learn at slower pace. Really? Asked Sasuke, trying to kick Itachi. From his point of view, appearance of Naruto in Uchiha clan so far had only advantages, huge ones, as Itachi was spending more time helping them with training or outright training. Also he had someone that could spar with him on somewhat even terms. Yes, said Itachi, grabbing outstretched leg of Sasuke and throwing him onto the mat with surprised yelp from younger Uchiha. Those were dark times and you should be happy that you don't need to live through them. I guess you were right, said Naruto and focused on his palm. Something said in his mind it was going to work. He raised it and pointed in direction he knew he wouldn't hit anything too precious, assuming it was going to work. When he did that, from his hand erupted golden chain that surged forward and pierced through the wall of the dojo and embedded its sharpened point in the wall of the mansion, passing through the corridor outside of dojo. That was unexpected, said Itachi, looking at the amount of damage caused by Naruto. I hope that you know how to retract those chains or it will be a problem. I think I know how to do that, said Naruto, yanking back the chain and returned to his hand, and it hid there. At least that problem is solved. I think that the next time we are going outside to do that training, sighed Itachi, I don't think that repairing dojo after each session will be a good idea. I guess so, said Naruto, scratching back of his head sheepishly. Sorry for that destruction, I didn't expect it to be so powerful. It happens, said Itachi, don't even get me started on what Shisui did when he started learning Fuden. He remembered well those days, and in the forest there were still visible scars caused by his training. What did he do? Asked Naruto. Ask him, not me, said Itachi, who was still fighting with Sasuke. How is going on your chakra control? Quite good, said Naruto, I'm able to run up and down the tree without too much of a trouble. That's better than quite good, said Itachi with thin smile on his face. It looked like Kage Bunshin was helping a lot with training. Shikamaru was sitting in the library of Nara clan. They had one of the best libraries in the village, and most of it was focused on famous clans and shinobi. How to recognize them, how to fight them, and how not to fight them. He was looking for any references to those things he saw on Naruto bracelet, as he knew they were important, or at least something in his mind told him so. He opened one of many scrolls about clans of Konohagakure, blew the dust of it, and looked at the list of clans. His gaze swept carefully over every single name and was looking for ones that weren't that well known, were currently extinct, had powerful Kekkei Genkai that could suggest unhealthy interest from spies and assassins from other villages. His gaze swept over two names he didn't spot in previous books he checked, Namikaze and Uzumaki. That piqued Shikamaru's suspicions, and he opened it on the spot, focused on them, and what he saw got his attention. According to what he read, they were descendants of Uchiha Barui and Senju Naomi, but that was rather boring compared to what else was about the clan. If he was seeing things right, they were able to manifest both Mokuden and Sharingan, which was an extremely rare thing to have. On their own they were rare, but together it was almost impossible. Yet that wasn't the only thing that shocked him about it. Crest of this clan was also interesting. It was a pitch black head of a wolf, and that was one of symbols that were visible in that armband. Which made him wonder more about Naruto, as so far everything seemed to point into direction of him being a Namikaze. Question was, who was his father? Last well-known one was Namikaze Minato, Yondaime Hokage and Konoha no Kiroi Senko, who looked almost the same as Naruto. Remove those birthmarks and you would have Minato. With those longer hairs, Naruto was looking even more and more like Yondaime Hokage, and that caused even more questions to appear inside of Shikamaru's mind. On a piece of parchment he made a note about him and looked at the Uzumaki clan, which was second that interested him. According to what he was able to read, they were royal family of the Uzushiogakure, village that was destroyed right after Second Great War, and their crest was a spiral. What was previous name used by Naruto? Loudly wondered Shikamaru, until it hit him. It was Uzumaki, so it meant that he was connected with both of those clans. Question was through whom? According to those scrolls there could be only one such pair, Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato, which would make him a prince of Konoha. Assuming this theory was right, he was descendant of the line of Uzushiokage, Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama. In ninja world, heritage was an important thing. Probably it was second the most important thing, right behind abilities of a person. Night was peaceful inside of Uchiha district. Everybody was sleeping or preparing for sleep, and not many people were on the streets. If they were there, they would have seen something that would intrigue them. From the rest of the village into the Uchiha compound and over the wall bordering it jumped inside 8 people dressed in black. It was obvious that they were ninja, yet question was who was their target and what they were doing here. Naruto was laying on his futon and soundly sleeping when something nagged his senses, telling him to wake up. He slowly opened his eyes and looked around. He felt a wave of bad emotions coming towards him, and he knew they had hostile intentions as he learned how to distinguish between those emotions. He silently gripped hilt of saber that was laying closely to his hand and hid it under covers, waiting for whatever was supposed to happen. There was a sound of breaking walls and snapping wood, followed by shower of splinters that rained onto everything inside of his room. Through that hole jumped in 8 people completely dressed in black. Naruto was faking his sleep and waited for them to get closer to him. 2 of them walked towards him to grab him, and for one of them it was the end of his life. Working purely on his instincts, Naruto's eyes snapped open. He assessed situation in a splinter of a second and saber that he had hidden under covers was embedded in the stomach of one that was closest to him, resulting in a scream of shock and pain from him as they didn't expect that kind of a resistance. They expected that they would be able to simply knock out their target and get out of the building with him. Not to mention huge stream of blood erupted from the wound covering everything around in blood. Naruto jumped away from those people. He was running only on the adrenaline and instincts. He knew he didn't stand a chance against remaining 7 people, so he looked for any possible exits. He could try to get out of the room through that hole they made, or through the doors that were behind him. He chose doors behind him. He quickly opened them, ran onto the corridor and waited. It looked like Itachi also noticed what was happening or heard it as he ran out of his room, his ninjutsu in hand and Sharingan blazing in his eyes. He was going to ask Naruto what happened when out of Naruto's room rushed out 7 shinobi dressed in black. They didn't have a lot of time to react as Itachi crashed into first 2 of them, hitting them in the crotch or solar plexus and effectively knocking them out. He knew they were hostile as they didn't look like Uchiha and Naruto was running away from them. Soon Itachi was joined by Fugaku and Makoto, with whom he quickly dealt with remaining guests, which after few moments were laying on the ground knocked out and with their hands tied behind their backs. "What was that noise?" asked woken up Sasuke, when he looked out of his room. Words stopped in his mouth, when he saw people laying on the ground, tied like Christmas gifts and everybody else looking over them with disgust. Itachi opened doors into Naruto's room and looked inside. He immediately noticed 8th assassin. This one was laying in pool of his own blood with saber lodged in his stomach. There was also a gaping hole in the wall of the room, suggesting how they got inside. "It seems that this one is dead," said Itachi, as he moved to one with saber in his stomach. "It looks like they got through that wall. They tried to catch Naruto, who was able to surprise them, killing one of them and he managed to escape." "I killed him?" weakly asked Naruto, before his knees buckled under him and he vomited onto the floor, which honestly speaking didn't shock Itachi at all, as that was typical reaction after just having a first kill. Yet he didn't expect him to be forced to kill someone so quickly. Killing was a part of ninja life, but genin were forced to kill. "Yes, you did so," said Makoto in soothing voice, while looking at Fugaku and Itachi to deal with those on the ground. "You did that in self-defense and you did the right thing. I know it feel wrong, but it will eventually get easier, but it can't get too easy. You need to find a reason for what you did." While Makoto was taking care of Naruto and calming him down, Itachi looked over whole scene and thought who would be brave or stupid enough to break into mansion that was in the middle of whole district. "We better tie them and dump them into T&I, along with killed one," said Fugaku, looking at Itachi who kneeled in front of one killed by Naruto and took out of the wound saber that was embedded in stomach of dead shinobi. When he pulled it out there was unpleasant sucking noise as he did so. "Yeah," agreed Itachi and made one of the most famous seals. One used for the cage bunshin. When he did so near him appeared 8 copies of him, which grabbed those bodies and disappeared out of the room with them. Well, one room is destroyed and there is giant hole in the wall. Also I think that those idiots will try to attack him once again or even more times. If you don't mind it, you will need to share a bedroom with him," said Fugaku. "We both know that first kill is a hard thing and those idiots will try at least once again to do the same thing." "Yeah," agreed Itachi, remembering well how hard it was for him. At least it was better that Naruto killed in self-defense. Mine for some unknown reason was taking that somewhat better. It will take him some time to get over it. Tomorrow he will be emotional wreck. So you won't have any problems with that?" asked Fugaku. "No," said Itachi, "it will be a minor inconvenience, but we will deal with this. Also I don't think they will dare to do the same thing with me being in the same room. There should be a spare bed or futon in one of storage rooms," said Fugaku and Itachi nodded. It would be going to be a hard time for Naruto, but not only for him. Everybody would be affected by it, but only in bigger or slower degree. Naruto didn't remember rest of the night or what happened after that kill, so he was a little shocked when he woke up not in his room, but in the one that was looking familiar and feeling familiar, yet wasn't his. He looked around and noticed that on the walls there were several posters and photos. In one corner were armor stands, one with matte gray armor, that looked quite light, as it was only breastplate, arm guards and shin guards. However, next to it stood second armor stand with black and red plate armor with fur collar. There was also a weapon stand there with multiple kunai, shuriken and few swords placed there. Naruto looked to his left and saw Itachi sitting there with crossed legs and looking at him. "Morning," said Itachi smiling a little, when he saw that Naruto was awake. He was shocked that Naruto was able to sleep so peacefully and for so long. When he was dealing with his first kill, he was haunted by nightmares and had troubles with sleeping for days. "Where am I?" asked Naruto, still visibly sleepy and tired. "In my room," replied Itachi. "After yesterday night we decided you will be safer here." "Yesterday night?" asked Naruto, until that wave of memories hit him like a ram. He became nauseous and paled. "Yes," said Itachi, "you just killed someone for the first time. It isn't nice, but as part of our job, and in this case it was in self-defense. It will never become painless, but it will get easier, and it won't hit you like a hammer, but it can't become too easy." Naruto paled a lot more, but after a moment he gained back his control over his body and mind. He was still pale and it was obvious he was in distraught, but he was at least looking somewhat better than moments before. "Drink this," said Itachi, handing small cup. To Naruto, "It is quite a strong tea with some additions that will calm your stomach and you won't be trying to puke every 5 minutes. "Thanks," mumbled Naruto and drank it. It was a truly disgusting mixture as he winced when he gulped it down. "It's disgusting. It isn't the best thing, but it works." "Only," replied Itachi, "since you are going to be sleeping in this room for the time being, some rules. Do not touch 2 upper drawers in my desk, I have some of private things there. From books you can read anything you wish. I think that's all." Morino Ibiki walked into T&I and on the floor in front of him he found 7 tied bodies, that were trying to get away from his position and one with ugly wound in his stomach. He only raised his eyebrow when he saw them. It was one of ways of delivering them to T&I by Anbu, but there also should be some note about who dropped them off and why. He looked for it for the moment and there it was. It was a small note, but it was obvious that Anbu did that. Question was, what was the reason for them being delivered hers? Ibiki took the piece of paper that was stuck behind the collar of one of those guests. He straightened it and unfolded. "Looks like I will be having fun today," he said, grinning like a madman once he read that piece of paper he received. They just did one of things that were punished rather harshly and he would get evidence to support for what they were being accused. "Tori." "Yes, sir," asked Anbu with bird mask. "Get me Inoichi here," said Ibiki, "and throw this lot into holding cells." "Hi," said Tori, grabbing tied prisoners and disappearing with them. "If you won't think about it," said Itachi, noticing Naruto wincing and being quite sad. "You won't be feeling the effects of it, trust me. I had the same problem. Do something to focus on it and forget about current thing. Train taijutsu or do your homework for the academy. It's the same thing as with a wound, you will irritate it and it will be causing you more pain and it will take longer to heal." Naruto only nodded. He didn't feel particularly good and he tried to get over it, but simply couldn't. So he guessed that Itachi method was the best and considered it for the moment before agreeing with him. "Taijutsu," suggested Naruto and Itachi only nodded. Yamanaka Inoichi entered into the headquarters of T&I and looked around, wondering why he was summoned into it. Then he spotted Morino Ibiki and towards him he walked as he knew that this man was one with answers to his questions. "Good that you are here," said Ibiki. 8 idiots tried to kidnap Naruto, 1 ended up dead, while rest is awaiting interrogation. From what I guessed looking at damage done to them, I would guess they got battered in taijutsu, so no mind damage. Any restrictions or can I rip their minds into pieces? Asked Inoichi, knowing well that it was crucial question, at least from his point of view. If he could do whatever he wanted, answers would be in matter of minutes, but subjects would be insane or crazy. But if he was forced to play by the rules, he would need more time to do that, but those minds would working, more or less. I want them sane, so that Hokage can punish them for what they did. Said Ibiki and Inoichi only nodded. He walked towards interrogation cells and looked at people kept inside or them, until his gaze landed on one that should be quite fruitful. He walked towards that cell, opened doors and entered it. When person that was inside of it saw who was walking towards him, he screamed in fear. After all, Yamanaka clan members were able to get every single secret out of person mind, excluding Jinchuriki, but that was completely different case because they had being that was quite helpful with dealing with unwanted Guests. Inoichi placed his hand on top of head of that ninja and entered his mind. He landed in blank-looking foyer and looked around. He ordered memories to appear and only multiple tiers of barriers appeared. He sighed and focused on them, trying to tear them apart, without too much collateral damage to the rest of that mind. Barriers were rather annoying thing to deal with and they could take a lot of time to break through, but that depended on the abilities of Yamanaka and how well trained was one that tried to protect his mind. If he was good, he would be able to resist for a long time. But in this case they weren't good, there was only whole lot of them and it took some time for Inoichi to break through all of them, and when he did that he was swarmed in memories, which could drive mad anybody that wasn't careful as there were simply too many of them. They could be watched only with utmost care and one at the time. Inoichi looked around the streams of memories looking for pieces of data that were important for him, anything related to that night and about orders they received to do so. When he found interesting piece of data, or something that caught his attention, Inoichi stopped there and watched the memory. Inoichi landed in the room, which he immediately recognized as council chamber, but this time there were only members of civilian council and some shinobi, one of which was currently interrogated. He looked around trying to memorize faces, so that they could be later used to accuse them and arrest them. But for now he focused on listening to the conversation. "I want you to kidnap Demon Container and bring him to my house," said one of them. If Inoichi was right, it was either Koga, who was one of richer merchants, or Haruno Mebuki, who was mother of Sakura. If he was going to guess, it sounded more feminine and screeching, which meant Mebuki. "What if we will be discovered?" asked one of those ninja. "Kill them all," said another counselor. "Nobody can see you." When Inoichi saw that memory, he knew he saw enough of it to be able to deal with it, and he pulled out of the memory. Memory end. When Inoichi left the mind of prisoner he was interrogating, prisoner immediately slumped and landed on the ground. It looked like it was too much for him to handle, which wasn't a huge surprise, as similar things usually happened during such interrogations. He thought that he saw everything he could see, yet some of those interrogations were surprising him. This one was one of such cases. He never expected those people to be so stupid, but well, that was them, ones that didn't know which end of kunai was pointy one. Naruto flew across the dojo from his attempt to block kick charging towards his chest. He thought that he was able to stop it without getting thrown across the room, yet he was so wrong. He crashed into the wall behind him and after a moment he managed to raise. Thankfully this time he didn't make new entrance into the room. "What was that?" Naruto asked, looking at Itachi, who was the one responsible for sending him crashing into the wall. "Sorry for that, but sometimes I get carried away," said Itachi, trying to avoid murderous gaze of Naruto, which was sweeping over him from time and time. He looked quite scary when angry, especially with his Sharingan spinning madly and glowing menacingly. "Why it always happened to me?" Naruto asked nobody in particular, before launching once again at Itachi. "Because you asked me to spar with you," only replied Itachi and blocked punch from Naruto. "Calm down, how many times I told you to think what you do, before doing that," said Itachi as he grabbed extended hand of Naruto, who tried to punch him. "Way too many times," muttered Naruto and focused back on Itachi. "So you were saying that those idiots were ordered by civilian council?" asked Ibiki after Inoichi told him what he had found. It would just another usual day for T&I, nothing too exciting and nothing too boring. "Yes," sighed Inoichi, "but proving who were the people which ordered them is nearly impossible. There are no clear images of their faces, which means we can't use it to accuse them, and arresting and interrogating won't work. They're the council after all. Which basically means we have criminals running loose and we have no evidence to deal with them in normal ways. Next time those idiots might accidentally trigger Naruto to use Biju Chakra and we know what will happen then. I will speak with Hokage about more patrols of Anbu around Uchiha district, but many will complain about it," said Ibiki, and Inoichi nodded. "There is also Anko and she might be able to get something out of them." "It's worth a shot," agreed Inoichi. "Nothing will hurt right now and something actually might help us. We both know that her ways of getting people to confess is highly effective." "Tu-san is Naruto, son of Namikaze Minato?" Shikamaru asked his father, while they were playing shogi and Shikaku was currently winning. When he heard those words his eyes widened and he looked at Shikamaru. He didn't think his son would be able to find those things so quickly. He was a Nara and had their genius level IQ, but still, he expected him to spend few more days searching for the things he needed. "Where did you find it?" quietly asked Shikaku, closely eyeing his son. "Our library, comparing things from many scrolls until I have found correct one. It took some time, but I found it," explained Shikamaru, and looking at that giant stone sculpture of previous Hokage helps. "I wonder who else know about his parentage." "You are correct," said Shikaku. "About second part of your question, I would say few Uchiha, Hyuga Hiyashi, Inazuka Sume, Hitaki Kakashi, rest of Ino Shika Cho, Sarutobi Asuma, Hokage-sama, and I think that's all. Probably Jiraiya-sama and Tsunade-sama know as well, or at least should. Do not mention it to anybody, even without knowledge about his parents made public, he has enough of enemies on his own." Fugaku was sitting in Hokage office with Hokage and leading interrogator, that is Ibiki Morino. On his face was calm facade, but inside he was fuming about multiple things, and soon someone would feel his rage. Question was who, when, and how strong it would be. "Are you telling me that civilians decided to kidnap Naruto because he was getting out of their clutches?" He half asked, half hissed, barely holding back his anger at civilian council, as they as always were pain in certain part of human body. "It seems so," said Ibiki, while trying not to enrage even further Uchiha that was sitting in front of him. "We were unable to get their names, we have suspicions, but we both know that based on them we can't do anything." "I see," said Fugaku, but it was obvious he was barely restraining his anger. "I won't openly react to it, but be aware that my patience is short and I won't tolerate next such attempt." "I understand your anger," said Hokage very carefully, trying not to anger him even more. "But with emotions we won't reach anything. We need to plan and do that carefully. At the moment we have a lot of time. Those shinobi will be kept infinitely in T&I, and civilian council will only shout about them. They know that one more such attempt and they can give us all evidence we need to smash their plots." "Fine, but I want 3 more squads of Anbu patrolling area around the district at all times," grumbled Fugaku, while in his mind he made a note to think about training Naruto even more. "Actually I was going to propose 4 squads," said Ibiki, 3 patrolling side of it facing the village and 4th one near the wall. "So that I can also catch spies on my own, as they seem to like to get through the district into Konoha." He noticed incoming storm and quickly added, "I do not say you are traitors, I'm just saying that spies like to choose the path through the district." "It seemed that I was unaware of those things," said Fugaku, but nodded in thanks. "I think that's all, and I have more pressing matters to attend to." After that kidnapping attempt, life quickly settled into somewhat normal, yet weird pattern, and everybody lived like nothing at all happened. Naruto rather quickly got over his emotional issues and once again was his usual cheerful self, yet sometimes he had moments when he was guilty-stricken. But it was getting better as time was passing by. In terms of his ninja training, it was finally time for him to start learning some proper ninjutsu. Naruto was standing on the training ground behind the mansion and was looking at Itachi, who said that he was going to show him how to use first true Kaiden jutsu that were the pride of Uchiha clan, along with few basic Raiden ones. Kaiden chakra is one of the most dangerous types of chakra and can burn your throat and lungs if improperly handled. It's created in your lungs and channeled through your throat, where it takes desired shape. Too little chakra and it won't ignite, too much and it will burn your throat," said Itachi looking at Naruto. "You need to estimate how much you will need and use such amount of chakra to perform it. For example, Enden will require far less than Gokaku and so on. That was the reason why I wanted you to work on your chakra control, so that you wouldn't get burned by playing with fire or lightning. So you can choose 2 from following ones: Gokaku, Hosenka, Enden, Ryuka and Shuiden. They're all C-ranked Kaiden ninjutsu and almost everybody in Konoha knows at least 1 or 2 from this list." "What about Gokaku, Hosenka and Ryuka?" asked Naruto, knowing well that he would need 2 of those to pass Uchiha rituals of becoming full clan member, which were during vernal equinox, which would be in next year as it was already after this year 1. Uchiha were heavily connected with sun and fire, as Kaiden jutsu had the greatest power when sun was in the sky, so they celebrated the moment when the days started to lengthen, which meant that vernal equinox and summer solstice were of the great importance, and during them were one of the greatest Uchiha feasts. Other important feast was held in remembrance of pact signed between Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama, one that created Konohagakure no Sato and was the impulse to create other villages, but it was celebrated in the whole village. Why not? Said Itachi and looked at Naruto. As you probably already see, Gokaku creates large ball made out of fire. Seals are as follows: tiger right pointing arrow, ram right pointing arrow, monkey right pointing arrow, boar right pointing arrow, horse right pointing arrow, tiger. When done properly it will create large fireball, somewhere between 20 and 30 feet. Few hours later Itachi walked into one of Dango's shops, which were usual meeting place of his small group of friends. He walked towards them and slipped into his seat, where he slumped. Which got attention of everybody there, as he was hard to tire and rarely showed how exhausted he was. What happened? Asked Kakashi, when he saw how Itachi looked. Naruto happened. Managed to say Itachi, I thought that twins were bad, he is way worse. Another wild chase all over the village. Asked Kurenai, getting Itachi attention. I thought it was obvious he was adopted by my father into Uchiha clan. Said Itachi, I was training with him Kaden manipulation and his Sharingan since he has fully evolved one and I almost exhausted my chakra reserves. You aren't the first that got tired out by Uzumaki. Said Kakashi, you forgot that I had same questionable pleasure, since Kushina sensei was wife of Yondaime and well, she had a lot of chakra. What do you mean by that? Asked Kurenai. Uzumaki have huge chakra reserves, their average chunin has more than our average kage. Explained Kakashi, that's without any boosts to it in terms of Biju. Naruto is what? 8 or 9, give or take few months. So he might have as much chakra as High Jonin, maybe borderline kage. You are right. Sighed Itachi, he can go for, last time it was I believe, 30 or 40 full power Gokaku and he is still able to fight. I wish luck Jonin that will be his sensei. When Itachi said that even Anko managed to drop her dango and looked at him in shock. While Kakashi only nodded as it was something he was used to, he had seen enough of Uzumaki to know that it was something normal for them. That's a lot. Managed to say Asuma, a little shocked by such amount of chakra. Give him few years to grow and get working relationship with Kyuubi. Said Kakashi, he will be a chakra powerhouse, huge one. But his academy records are obnoxious. Said Kurenai. Were obnoxious. Corrected her Itachi, it seems that small and pleasant talk with few people fixed them. Itachi-kun, said Anko, getting his attention. You were the one responsible for those 7 alive and 1 dead dropped in T&I in the middle of night. Alive yes, admitted Itachi, dead one woke up wrong person and got saber into his stomach. It seems that they didn't learn that trying to kidnap Censor is a bad thing. Censor? Asked Kurenai, who the hell is Censor there? Naruto. Said Itachi, quietly and making sure that not many heard him. He probably doesn't realize he is one, but he is rather good at it and that was the case. He was surprised when asleep and from what I guessed he did that purely on instincts. Not bad, said Kakashi, while slowly sipping his sake. Itachi talked for few more minutes with his friends and some of them were in the past his teammates, after he retreated into Uchiha district to get some sleep, as he needed to wake up early to be ready to go on a mission. First one in 6 or 7 weeks, as previous ones were spent on training his brothers, which he didn't considered so annoying now. Hope you guys enjoy first part of this story, do like, share and subscribe.